Welcome to the 36th Annual International Drag Racing Hall of Fame induction ceremony held here in Gainesville, Florida. Pat and I formed the Drag Racing Hall of Fame many years ago to honor the drivers, the crew chiefs, the innovators, and the pioneers who originally built this sport from junkyard parts and raw determination. So these are the men and women who push the limits. So sit back, enjoy the show, and help us honor these people who were great in their day. Let's fire it up and let's get started.
Hello everyone and welcome to Gainesville, Florida. Welcome to the 2026 International Drag Racing Hall of Fame induction ceremony. Tonight we have an incredible class of inductees here in 2026, an international class that will be honored throughout the evening, as well as special award winners that will also be honored. We will take a look through so many various aspects of the sport through the eyes of not only the folks being inducted, but by those speaking on their behalf as well. I'm Brian Loans. You may know me from the NHRA on Fox, of the NHRA Drag Racing Series and various other drag racing announcing events across the country. It's my great pleasure to be here tonight and to provide hosting duties as well as speak on behalf of Ron Tobler, who will be inducted later on this evening. So to get our evening started in the proper way, we have an invocation, and for that invocation, I'd like to bring up Pastor Mike Booker, the fastest pastor in America.
I have three. I'm honored to be here. I thank Don for allowing me to be here. I have three things in common with Don. We love drag racing. He had a high regard for my dad. And we love and believe in Jesus, and we're not afraid to tell people that. And my dad was inducted in 2008. My brother happened to be wearing his ring. I've never even worn it before. But he had the only Chevy and Top Fuel to win a national event. He had the ET record. And I idolized my dad. He was everything to me. I thought I would drive Top Fuel when I turned 18, but he died unexpectedly when I was 15. He was only 37. And I ran from one end of the house to the other screaming no. I was so devastated. And then somebody told me that Jesus knocks on the door of your heart. And if you let him in, he'll come into you. And I did that. And it changed me forever. A life and a joy and a peace came into me that changed me forever. And all I wanted to do was tell the whole drag racing world, as cool as drag racing is, I found something better. I actually made a drag racing t-shirt and it said Jesus is Lord. And I went to the 1979 U.S. Nationals, and people probably thought I was a nut, but I just wanted everyone to have the blessing that I had, knowing the Lord. And God wouldn't let me race. He told me no. I was going to be a pastor. I've been a pastor 30 years. A lot of the drivers would get my Bible messages, and actually 8 years ago, Brian Karate right here, him and Antron paid for me to get my top alcohol license and then Top Fuel. And so God's let me do it, but it's a platform to point people to Him. Me standing here is God letting me have the desire in my heart, which is telling the whole drag racing world how awesome Jesus is. And so if anybody's hurting, empty, lonely, if you're not sure where you'd go if you died tonight, talk to me when this is over, because in 100 years, that's all that's gonna matter. So Lord, we thank you for your goodness, thank you for your grace. Lord, I ask that you bless this time, and I pray that everything we say and do would honor you. And if anyone here is hurting, Lord, I ask you to be with them, and especially Joe Costello, I know with his mom's health, he asked me to pray for her. So Lord, we pray that you touch her, heal her, and give him peace and comfort. Bless the rest of this time. We ask this in your name, Jesus. Amen.
Thank you very much, Mike. Now, tonight's coverage is streaming live on competitionplus.com, also on Flow Racing. So if you'd like to follow that coverage live, if you have friends at home, make sure you remind them of that. A quick bit of housekeeping as we move along. I'd like everybody to grab the program, the two-page program at their table, and I'd like you to open that program. And if your program has the red stamp of a swamp rat on it, you have won a Hall of Fame commemorative portfolio. So there will be a winner at every table. You'll be able to pick that portfolio up at the Hawthorne Room, which is directly next to us, at the close of the evening. So if you got the red stamp, you get yourself a portfolio, grab it at the end of the night. We got winners over here. Austin Proc's got one. It's going wild. So we're going to begin tonight with our first inductee. And our first inductee is not a driver, and he's not a crew chief, but he stands as one of the most recognizable names in modern drag racing history. A name whose work has had an impact on virtually every person in some form, shape, or fashion in this room. A man whose work and whose guidance has helped me in my own life and given me a big break in my career. When he gave me a shot back in the day, made a phone call on my behalf, and somehow we ended up here. His name is Bob Frey. He's one of the greatest announcers in drag racing history. And to introduce Mr. Bob Frey, let me introduce to you Jack Beckman.
Good evening. Sitting over at table 16, you guys all determined the winners from your pamphlet there? So Austin Prock won at our table. And my only wish is that's the only thing this weekend Austin wins. There's 19 of us in Funny Car hoping the same thing. Congratulations to all the inductees of the class of 2026. Bob Smith, and you guys don't need to applaud because they're all going to come up for their presentations one at a time here. Arlene Johnson, Anita Mäkelä, David and Buddy, you may know them as Reher and Morrison, Steve Boggs, Ron Tobler, and Bob Frey. And I want to thank the selection committee, Ted Jones, Harry Hibbler, Greg Sharp, and Steve Gibbs. Is Steve Gibbs in the house tonight? Steve Gibbs will also be getting an induction into the Motorsports Hall of Fame of America on Tuesday, I believe it is. And to be in both of those halls of fame says a lot about that man's achievements and his character matches, and I just think that's phenomenal to the whole Gibbs family. And none of this would be possible without Big. And after a cochlear implant, Dawn can hear you. So you may want to watch out what you're saying there. Dawn had the foresight 36 years ago to start a drag racing hall of fame. And when my sponsorship ran out and I went back to fixing elevators, I remember the day distinctly where my phone rang and it said Don Garlitz. And I answered and he said, Jack, I'd like you to be on the selection committee for the Hall of Fame. And as a lifelong fan of the sport, being in a position where you actually get to nominate and select the people that get to come up on this stage and represent the pinnacle of the sport, when I look at the people that come up here and think that in some small part as a selector, you get a chance to present to the world and say, hey, these people, they did all this and they deserve to be here. And it's probably one of the greatest honors of my life to be able to do this. And the gentleman that I'm selecting, as Brian Loans had mentioned, and hey, Brian literally stepped in last second to take care of having a great MC for this. And somebody asked me, they said, you think he'll do a good job? I said, no, I think he'll do a phenomenal job. That guy does everything at 100%. Remember, if you're giving 110%, you're not good at math. Bob Frey. My relationship with Bob started about 35 years ago. He was this guy on the East Coast that made an appearance on the NHRA Today weekly television show, and he wasn't Steve Evans and he wasn't Brock Yates. And you'll get this, your James Bond is your James Bond. If you're a Sean Connery guy, none of them measure up. If you're a Roger Moore guy or whoever, the rest don't measure up. And he wasn't Steve Evans and he wasn't Brock Yates. But there was something about him. He was funny. And like by the end of the first show, I chuckled at this guy. And by the end of the second show, I was an admirer of Bob. And then when I started hearing his voice over the PA at the races, I became a hardcore fan of Bob's. I just thought he was one of those guys that was just an overachiever. The things he relayed over the microphone, like the racers, the crew chiefs, the car owners, they make the events take place, but the photographers immortalize it. The writers make something that the people at home can attach to, and the announcers make it exciting. So those people are just as important to the sport as any crew chief or any driver. I studied at the school of Bob. In fact, I don't think I'd be up here tonight if it wasn't for the time I spent listening to Bob Frey. I have watched so many of his presentations. I've watched so many of the award ceremonies that he's hosted. I've watched him do countless charity events, and the man never accepted a dime. And I sat out there and I listened. I do still get nervous doing this stuff, but I enjoy doing this stuff. I think Brian would agree you enjoy passing on some knowledge or some entertainment to the listeners out there. And I watched Bob and I studied Bob and I listened, and he absolutely made me strive to be a better speaker. And the way he did it, I don't know if Bob gets nervous. You'd never know it by looking at him. It's just this effortless flow, but I'm pretty sure he's harvested that over decades of doing that. And you guys will never know the opportunities he's provided me. There was a time when he was stepping aside from stuff and he says, hey, listen, I think Beckman could get in there and do that. And maybe I'm riding on your coattails, brother, but there's some pretty nice coattails. So for that, I thank you very much. 46 years, am I right, Bob? He's 46 years old. Oh, wait, that was the other pair. Sorry, my mistake. 46 years of announcing. That might be the top line on Bob's resume, but his contributions go so many lines and pages beyond that. His communication expertise includes all that extra stuff that he's done that I've told you guys about. His data sheets have literally set the standard. What a lot of people don't know about Bob, and I see a lot of people in the room that also are absolute stat hounds here that gather information, and every one of them would agree the gold standard sits over at that table. He continues to supply info that are used by a lot of people in the sport. I do a lot of events, and I will call or text Bob and I say, what do you have on this? And he's never once said, geez, Jack, you know, the first 50 are free, but after that, he'll say, hold on a minute. And then he sends me this thoughtful, in-depth, accurate assessment on everything that I need so that when I go to an event, I feel well prepared on that. It's not just the communication behind the microphone. Bob's writing skills are legendary. And if you read his articles, he did this ongoing deal in National Dragster. You can't help but notice, even if you didn't know the man, his kindness, his sense of humor, and his passion absolutely bled through every word he put on that page. He's very self-effacing, a self-proclaimed geek. I'm not hurting your feelings here, I know that for a fact. And you are the coolest geek I have ever known in my life, Bob. Bob's a family man. And you can tell by looking around him at his table, there's a lot of proud people, and there's a proud man there surrounded by people that love him. And by retirement, he's actually had a lot more time. When I call him, many times he was at a grandkids baseball game or doing something else with family. He's still a hardcore geek, though. He's still updating his stats every pass, every round, every race. A fellow United States Air Force veteran. Bob's a former International Drag Race Hall of Fame Founders Award recipient. And the day that they carve out the Mount Rushmore of the greatest announcers in the history of drag racing, that will be one of the faces up there. And gosh, Bob, I don't know if there's anything else to say. I guess you can kind of take a stroll up here. I was going to say I pronounce you, but that would sound a little bit too official. So, ladies and gentlemen, I now present to you the first recipient of the class of 2026 of the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame, my friend and one of my idols, Bob Frey.
Jack, I got to tell you, I mean this from the bottom of my heart. Out of all the introductions that I've had in my career, that's the most recent. A couple of things. Jack said I did a lot of things and never accepted a dime. That was not by choice. I can guarantee you that. But I will say this. I did used to do a lot of things for the people who draw for the charity. I worked the Hall of Fame thing here for 13 years. I was called to do a lot of celebrations of life and was very willing and pleased to donate the time. Jack has done a lot of that since then. He keeps calling me up and said, Bob, I got another free gig. Thanks for that. So every now and then, if you get him there, throw the kid an Applebee's gift card or something, for God's sakes. He needs something for all the work that he does. But he said, Bob's funny. I said, the first time I was on TV and did one of the TV shows, I was driving from the track back to the hotel, back to the rental car place, and a guy sitting on the bus with me keeps looking at me, and I'm thinking, wow, this guy knows talent. I can tell that. And he kept looking at me, and after a while he went, you're funny. And I thought that was pretty cool. About 2 minutes later, he looked at the guy next to me and he went, you're funny. But anyway, because I'm the first one up here, I get to do a lot of the housekeeping. So 2 announcements I want to make. First of all, the people from the hotel told me there's 2 cars out front that are parked that have to be moved. I get to do the housekeeping. One is a black Mercedes-Benz with license plate My Benz. So if that's your car, you're illegally parked, would you please move that one? The other one is a brown and green Pontiac Bonneville. It's not illegally parked, it's just really ugly, and they'd like you to get away from the front of the building if you could, please. So we'd appreciate that. Before I actually begin, I want to say there's a friend of mine, Jack and Brian mentioned people that couldn't be here. A good friend of mine can't be here tonight. He was going to be sitting with us at our table, and his name's Wayne Mäkelä. Wayne is a racer from Mäkelä, New Jersey, where I used to race. He is probably the greatest super gas racer in the history of the sport. That may be a little exaggeration, but he's my friend and it's my night, so he's the greatest super gas racer in the history of the sport. He was going to come down this weekend and bring his Bill Grumpy Jenkins tribute car to be part of the 75th year celebration. He was going to be on display down here, but he got some health problems. He was not able to make it. So to Wayne, his wife Judy, who I hope they're watching on YouTube tonight, we miss you. I wish you were here. And Wayne, when we get home, if you and Judy come over to my house, I might let you touch my trophy.
Why did you put me?
I just might. There are a lot of people that I would like to thank, and I've been very blessed in my career. The first is my longtime friend, Danny. I went to school with him. Danny introduced me to 2 things. He introduced me to drag racing in 1962, and he introduced me to my wife in 1966. And for one of those 2 things, I'm eternally grateful. Oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for both of them. I couldn't read my writing. I'm sorry. But my wife is here. My daughters are here. We have 5 of my grandsons are here. My sister, my brother, and I appreciate them all for their support. But my wife and I will celebrate our 58th wedding anniversary in May of this year. And people ask me, they say, how do you stay married so long? I said, well, I traveled a lot. And they went, no, really? And I went, no, really? Yeah. But I tell you, there was nothing like coming home after being on the road for 10 days. I would come home, drop my suitcase on the floor, grab Diana, look her in the eyes and say, can you clean my underwear? I got to leave on Wednesday for another gig. And so, for some reason, she would always wind up doing it. But she's the one that made me enabled to do all this, and I thank you, and I can't thank you enough. So if nothing else gets said tonight, let you know I love you from the bottom of my heart, and I appreciate all you've done. There are a lot of other announcers that I followed, and I'm glad to be inducted into the Hall of Fame, following in the footsteps of Steve Evans and Dave McClellan and Barney Partridge. Now check that, Bernie Partridge. That's a very inside joke, by the way.
I get it.
I'd appreciate that. Brett Kepner, all the people that have been involved in drag racing as announcers. And I might be the only person in the Hall of Fame who has never changed a spark plug, changed their oil, done anything mechanical in the car. Now, I'm almost afraid to say that because Big Daddy can hear me say that now, and he's going, what? We got a guy in the Hall of Fame that never changed his oil or his spark plug? But it's too late. You can't rescind it, Big. But the other thing I want to say, for Don Garlis to start this Drag Racing Hall of Fame, to make it such a great place, probably the best social gathering in the sport during the course of the year. You've done so much. We went out there today, and the names of this year's inductees are already etched into the stone. the big monument out there. And Don, on behalf of everybody here in the sport of drag racing, and especially our inductees this year, I want to thank you very much. There's nobody like Big Daddy Don Garlitz, and I mean that sincerely. A couple of other people I'd like to thank. Jack Miselli hired me at Atco Dragway in 1966. I announced my first race there. The first car I ever saw go down the racetrack was a 62 Superstock car. And I remember it said Hollywood Perkins on the side of it. And for years, I never knew who drove the car. And since I retired, I've had a lot of time. I went and found out the guy that drove that's name was Irvin Allen Dieter. And thanks to the internet, I was able to find him and track him down. And I called him up and I said, "Is this Irvin?" He said, "Yes." I said, "You drove a 62 Superstock car at Atco?" And he said, yes, I did. And I said, "I'm Bob Frey." And I was waiting for the usual response that I got, like, "Wow, the Bob Frey? Wow, Bob Frey's calling me?" But Irvin just said, "Who?" And it's God's little way of keeping you down. But I said, "Irvin, you were the first car that I ever saw go down the racetrack." I said, "It was a 62 Dodge, right?" He said, "No, it was a Plymouth." I said, "It was black and gold, right?" He said, "No, it was red and white." I said, "It was a 4-speed." He said, "No, it was an automatic." I said, "I remember it like it was yesterday." After I worked at Atco and I announced NASCAR drag races, I did their 67 World Finals, one of the few drag racing announcers that did that. I then worked for Larry Carrier at IHRA. I worked for IHRA for 11 years, and I was asked one time, how come I went to work with IHRA? And I said, I sent a letter to Larry Carrier, I sent a letter to Bernie Partridge. Larry Carrier called me up, and I worked for him for 11 years. And a lot of the people in this room were there racing when I was doing those announcing, and there were some great years. While I was doing that, I still worked at Atco, and then Mike Lewis from Maple Grove called me to do a couple of races up at his racetrack. And then when Maple Grove got their first national event in 1985, I worked that, and from 1985 to 2012, I worked the NHRA national events, and I thank Mike Lewis for that a lot. Phil Burgess from National Dragster had a lot to do with my writing career. The main thing I had to do with National Dragster is I probably had more editors resign from trying to read my crap, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. I wrote my Bobtails column from 1990 up until the year that I retired, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. And I want to thank Phil Burgess and all the people at National Dragster for giving me a little pulpit besides just the microphone. My good friend Rick Green. Rick is the head of Drag Race Central, and Drag Race Central for the last 30 years has covered drag racing. And if you want to find anything about the sport of drag racing, I don't care if it was NHRA, IHRA, UDRA, PDRA, CIA, FBI, IUD, whatever the initials were. Well, except that last one. You can forget the last one. But it's all on Drag Race Central. And along with Rick, we're able to combine a lot of the statistical information that we have. I believe we have the greatest database in drag racing. I have a list of 73 top fuel cars at the 71 Winter Nationals. We have them all listed with ETs and mile per hour. And I don't think there's any place else you can find that besides the stuff that Rick and I have been able to put together. And a fellow named Chris Miller that works for Jim Head helped us put it all into a database, and we're very proud to be able to acknowledge a lot of racers who may only have one line in the drag racing history, but we were able to put that together. So I wanted to thank Rick for letting me work with Drag Race Central for all of those years. I had a chance to work here for Don Garlitz doing the Hall of Fame, and I also had a chance to sit out there in the audience for so many years. I was up on stage for that legendary Bill Maverick Golden Marathon, which we always like to say ended about 2 days ago. I also sat out there in the audience, and I will never forget the time Big Daddy was up here on the stage, and he called Tommy Ivo up to talk with him. And I looked at the other 9 people on the stage, and I said, 2 minutes. And they said, what's 2 minutes? I said, 2 minutes before Garlitz and Ivo start talking about space aliens. And they said, not gonna happen. I said, $20 a man. And 1 minute and 37 seconds later, I was $180 richer and laughing my ass off. But it was great. But Don has done such a marvelous job. And I also wanted to thank, I know Ron Capps is going to be up in a little bit. The year that I retired, Ron Capps came to me at Pomona and said, Bob, when I retire at the end of this day, and he was running for the championship against Jack Beckman. He said, Bob, when I retire, I'm going to give you my fire suit. And I said to Ron, I said, I really hope that you win the championship. And Ron just said, well, I appreciate that. And to this day, Ron never knew why I wanted him to win the championship. And Ron, Do you know how much a championship fire suit would get on eBay? Ron finished second, and that fire suit's hanging in my shop at home. But Ron Tobler signed that fire suit, and after tonight, I'll have a fire suit signed by a Hall of Fame member. That just means it goes right up in value. But it's been a marvelous run. I thank you all very much. I can't thank Big Daddy again. And I did want to mention also, you see Bill Simpson Foundation up there. Everybody in the room knows Bill Simpson. Bill does such a great job for safety. Bill has helped, at least this year, with the honorees, with tickets for the tables, rooms for the hotels and everything, and that means a lot to us. We do appreciate that. And in honor of Bill Simpson, we're gonna pull one lucky name out. One lucky person's gonna come up on stage tonight, and in honor of Bill Simpson, we're gonna set him on fire. So I wanna thank you all very much. It's been a great night, and God bless everybody.
Coming up at the 36th Annual International Drag Racing Hall of Fame induction ceremony presented by the Peltzman family, pro stock legends Reher and Morrison enter the hall. But next, Pat Garlett's Memorial Award winner, Arlene Johnson. Special thanks to Donovan, Amato Properties since 2002, and tonight's trophy sponsor, Pat and Jerry Baltus. Thank you for your support of the 36th Annual International Drag Racing Hall of Fame induction ceremony presented by the Peltzman family.
Have you ever dreamed of getting behind the wheel of a dragster, a high-powered door slammer, or even a funny car? Are you a racer looking to improve your skills, upgrade your license, or acquire a champion's mindset? Since 1985, Frank Hawley's Drag Racing School has been the world's premier venue for all that and more. Thousands have graduated. Now it's your turn. Led by multi-time NHRA champion Frank Hawley and instructed by drag racing champions, the school is open to all with any level of experience. Visit FrankHawley.com to learn more about options like the dragster experience, group events, and more. That's FrankHawley.com.
At Lincoln Electric, innovation is at the heart of everything we do. Introducing Power MIG 262P, the ultimate pulsed MIG machine. We're dedicated to making your welding experience easier, more productive, and more efficient. As the world leader in advanced welding and cutting solutions, we offer an unparalleled lineup of innovative products. Lincoln Electric, where innovation meets excellence.
So as we continue to move through our program here, we have various specialty awards that are given out over the course of this evening. We have our Hall of Fame inductees, but we also have folks that are recognized for their contributions to the sport of drag racing. One of the things we'd like to take a moment to do at this moment is to recognize all the current members of the Hall of Fame who are in the room tonight. If you could please stand. If you are currently a member of the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame, please stand up. That would include the likes of Don Garlitz, Warren Johnson, Frank Hawley, who's here tonight, Joe Amato, Jim Walter, Tim Richards, Bruce Larson, Ray Moats, Mike Lewis, Shirley Muldowney, Roy Hill, Ted Jones, Tommy Ivo, Joe Schubeck, who's in the back of the room, Chris Karamessinas, Dennis Holding, Don Prudhomme, Lynn Prudhomme, who's a former Pat Garlett's Award winner, and Mr. Phil Burgess. One more time, a round of applause for all of our current members of the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame.
The early days of drag racing were a male-dominated sport, but ask nearly every competitor from back then and they'd tell you they wouldn't have accomplished what they did without a supportive spouse. Whether it was turning wrenches, handling the logistics of travel, or taking care of the kids and the home. Arlene Johnson personifies all of those traits. She and husband Warren did it all together. While he was building and driving, she was handling all of the day-to-day businesses and planning that goes along with racing across the country. From 1963, there was hardly an event Warren attended without Arlene by his side. She was as vital to his success as any part, car, or manufacturer. And she continued in that role for their son, Kurt. The Pat Garlett's Memorial Award was created by Dawn to honor females who have made significant contributions to this sport, and none are more deserving than Arlene Johnson. To present for Arlene, Kelly Wade.
more. Okay. Mr. Garlitz, thank you. I think you made a wonderful choice in selecting Arlene for this very special award. It's impossible to know how history might have played out had Warren and Arlene Johnson not met 65 years ago. Undoubtedly, the professor of postdoc would have been successful, exceptionally studious, focused, driven. It's likely that there would have been wins and championships, but what WJ built was not in solitude. Always he had Arlene by his side. They met at a school dance. Sorry, I'm gonna tell this story. They met at a school dance around Christmas time when they were 17. Arlene and her cousin Betty didn't have a ride home. It was a brisk Minnesota night. A boy named Frankie had a car, but he also had a friend named Warren. Warren and Arlene hit it off, met up again for New Year's Eve, and they've been fairly inseparable ever since. They married at 18, had Kurt when they were 19, and before that, they went to the racetrack for the first time in 1962. In 1970, this is my absolute favorite part, they were fatefully tempted by a brand new class, NHRA Pro Stock. By 1976, racing was their full-time gig. It was a natural progression for Arlene. Her father worked long shifts in the mines in Minnesota, and when he was home, she enjoyed spending time with him, cleaning parts, helping around the shop while he worked on cars. She knew what hard work looked like. She understood where to help and when to step back. And she liked cars. When WJ decided to go racing, she was the first crew member, and while her husband was in the shop, focused on research and development, Arlene was running the back end of their program, from managing the office, answering phones, processing invoices, and everything in between. At the track, when Kurt was little, she would change tires, charge batteries, handle fuel, change jets in the carburetors, pack the parachutes, and tackle whatever else she could to make sure that Warren could focus on what Warren did best. She was home with him and on the road with him through the leanest of years, when they had one engine and one transmission and slept in the truck instead of a comfortable hotel room or even an RV. She was with him before the spotlight, before the sponsors, before performance barriers were broken. She's made countless meals, ridden with the crew in the truck thousands of miles, and driven thousands and thousands more miles in their motorhome to bring home base with her as she supported the entirety of a legendary career. With Arlene as his counterpart, Warren Johnson became the most winning pro stock driver in history in 2002 when he passed Bob Glidden's record with an 86th victory. He claimed 11 more wins over the years, the 97th coming in St. Louis in 2010. And Arlene was an integral part of every single one of those milestones, including 6 NHRA and 2 IHRA World Championships. She was an important factor in Kurt's career as well, there to support him through 42 wins so far. I'm still holding out hope. And every time he came right up against a championship, which was in multiple seasons. But Arlene has always also held her own identity. Although her kindness is vast, no one would dare question that she is a force to be reckoned with. She's strong and stubborn and unafraid to say what she's thinking, and she will fiercely defend her family. She's honest and reliable, and she's a keeper of memories. Without her scrapbooks and photo albums and generous insight, the Warren Johnson biography would not have been nearly as rich. Through that experience, I became to know that she's witty and she's fun. She makes a mean margarita, which everybody knows. And she has the most beautiful penmanship you've ever read and seen. She's a very, very good friend. The history books have Warren's name all over them, but it was Arlene behind the scenes making sure it was all possible. It is a great privilege and honor to introduce the 2026 Pat Garlitz Memorial Award recipient, Arlene Johnson.
Thank you, Kelly. She said it all. I don't have to say much more, but thank you, Don, Big Daddy, for Pat's Memorial Award.
You would have loved it.
I knew Pat. I talked to her a few times at the track, so it was nice knowing her. She left us too soon. Anyway, what a roller coaster it's been. Remember all the firsts, the first win, the first championship, the first to 180, 190, 200. Kurt's first win, first year of racing, first to the sixes. Those were records never to be broken. Going down the road, meeting all the fans and friends we met. Still today, we're still meeting people, and it's been great. Warren, he would say, after working all day in the garage, we'd leave late at night, and he'd say, I'd ask him first if he was going to drive. Yeah, I'll drive, he said. This was our truck. We wouldn't get too far down the road, Wisconsin state line, and he was tired. I'd say, do you think it's time for me to drive? Yep, 35 miles. That's all he made it. Many times. I don't know how many times I slipped going across Wisconsin, but I did. Anyway, I want to congratulate all the inductees here, all the past inductees, and any future ones. Anyway, congratulations to everybody. And I'm winging it. God bless America, and everybody, I wish them safe racing tomorrow, all weekend. Thank you.
Coming up, a couple of multi-time world champions will enter the hall. Steve Boggs and Ron Tobler will have their moment. But next, Finland's own Anita Mäkelä puts the International in the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame induction ceremony presented by the Peltzman family. Special thanks to Masters Entertainment Group, Denswood Sports Marketing, and the Bill Simpson Foundation for their generous grant helping make it possible for tonight's inductees to attend.
You would never drive your car in the rain without windshield wipers, so why ride your motorcycle without one? When the sky opens up, your visor turns into a blur. You lift your hand, you lose control, you lose visibility. Biker Guard is the electric windshield wiper for your helmet. Biker Guard clears rain instantly, so your hands stay on the bars and your eyes stay locked on the road. Cars have wipers, trucks have wipers, now riders do too. Don't ride blind. Ride with Biker Guard. Get yours at bikerguard.com. In the high-performance world, saving weight is critical. You can save more than 40 pounds of unsprung weight with wheels from Lightspeed Racing. Lightspeed Racing makes the world's best lightweight performance wheels and accessories, including forged magnesium wheels, lighter than carbon fiber, better tensile and fatigue strength than forged aluminum. Lightspeed Racing, nearly endless colors and finishes, and 100% custom made. Choose record-setting, race-proven, custom wheels from lightspeedracing.com.
Each year at the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame induction ceremony presented by the Peltzman family, we like to take the time to honor the pioneers who we have lost. Rich Guasco, Ed Pink, Larry Minor, Jerry the King Ruth, Forrest Lucas, Sid Waterman, the Cam Father, Ed Iskandarian, and Fred Sibley. No longer with us, but they will never be forgotten.
What truly makes this the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame is all of the inductees from outside of the United States. Finland's Anita Mäkelä is already in the British Drag Racing Hall of Fame and is Europe's winningest top fuel driver of all time. We welcome Anita Mäkelä to the class of 2026 of the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame. Presenting for Anita, Bobby Lagana.
Hello. First, Big Daddy, thank you so much for this every year, and it just means so much to the sport of drag racing, the families, and want to congratulate the entire 2026 inductees and all of their family and friends that have supported them. Seems to be a common theme that without your supporting cast of family and friends, none of this would be possible. So I'm going to tell you guys a story about why I have the honor here of introducing the lovely Anita Mäkelä. In 2013, our dad was sick in a surgically induced coma in New York City Hospital. And my brother and I were fortunate enough to spend our entire lives with our dad and didn't feel like we needed to be in the hospital for the last month. And Donnie Bender had called us up and asked us if we'd like to go to Sweden to go racing with Anita Mäkelä at an FIA event. And it just was a complete unknown, but it was a nitro car, and it was an opportunity to go racing and distract our minds. Just felt right. So we communicated with Anita, and we made plans. Flew to Sweden, got off the plane, and we were looking for a ride. And it was one of those moments where you were unsure of your direction, but you knew it was right where you were at. And we spotted this woman with a racing jacket and the biggest smile. I mean, the biggest smile in Europe. And me and Dom knew that had to be Anita. From that moment on, Anita embraced us as her American family. By the time we got to the track, it was like we'd known each other for 20 years. We met Tommy, Anita's husband, Sammy, Anita's crew chief, and the team. We worked really hard, raced even harder that weekend. Somehow we managed to qualify #1 and make it to the finals against Thomas Natas. We were excited and anxious at the same time. Quick story about that morning. Before we started racing, Anita had one specific request for Dom and myself. She asked us that if we were to lose first round, second round, the finals, that we keep our own emotions in check and congratulate the team that beat us. We learned quickly that being happy for the team that wins is the European way. It was an amazing moment because, especially with our dad being sick, and our dad taught us the easiest way to be happy all the time is to be happy for other people. And we lost in the finals that day to Thomas, but we were able to become really good friends with Karsten and Thomas because of that moment. I was not able to go back to Europe and race with Anita in person, but Dom was, and went to almost every race for the next 5 years. I may be a little jaded with my love for Anita, her team, and my brother, but I feel like their success during that run raised the bar in Europe, and we were able to admire their performances from Top Fuel Racing in Europe from that. It's funny, little did we know that fateful day in Sweden that Anita would go on to win 3 more championships and break numerous ET and mile-per-hour records and win more races that we could count on our hands, especially me and Dom. Yeah. Anita's love and passion for racing and car culture came as a young woman visiting America. Anita fell in love with a white 1978 Firebird, which she has to this day. Back home in Europe, Anita started her racing career in competition eliminator and moved on to Top Methanol, where she won 2 championships. In the late 90s, Anita just happened to meet her future husband, Tommy, and his Top Fuel dragster. And she earned her Top Fuel license. Anita and Tommy have raced Top Fuel dragsters together from the time they were married. Anita took a few breaks to welcome her and Tommy's kids, Hannah and Heike, proving that family is the most important thing to Anita and Tommy. Thanks to their hard work and success of their chicken farm, Tommy and Anita were able to continue racing Top Fuel and to grow their racing program to be as successful as we know her to be. Anita's success comes from the family-first atmosphere created by her and Tommy and by the leadership of Sammy, Anita's crew chief. I'd be doing a disservice if I also didn't mention that Ben Patterson from Australia was a major part of Anita's success in the last few years. Benny's another one of our friends and family from around the world. I chuckle now just thinking about Donnie Bender and Kevin Seiko making it possible for myself and Dom and Jake Sanders and Stewie and Benny to all go racing in Europe. The common theme for all of us is, when can we go back? I can go on forever with European stories. So come see me this weekend if you want to hear about warm drinks, the best buffalo chicken, 55-gallon water dunks, team sauna trips, very weird, but and $10,000 Air Jordans, believe it or not. Racing in Europe is an amazing experience, highlighted by the people. The passion showed by the FIA, track owners, sponsors, fans, and especially the racers is second to none. When you think about the logistics of traveling to an event, you're not crossing multiple state borders, complaining about weigh stations and dirty truck stops. In Europe, you're crossing multiple countries, crossing major bodies of water with ferries and dealing with multiple country laws. The racetracks are highly maintained and safety is second to none. The common theme is the camaraderie of everyone there makes you want to go back. Anita has always been gracious to her fans and respectful to her competition, and she has never taken it lightly that she is a major role model for girls all over the world. Anita didn't just win races at the racetrack, she built a family-style system across the world. Anita is exactly the type of person, drag racer, that deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. It's now that I would like to introduce to you the 4-time FIA Top Fuel World Champion, Anita Mäkelä, whose smile is as radiant as the Northern Lights.
Good evening, everyone. Ja terveisiä Suomesta. That's Finnish, and I said greetings from Finland. Thank you, Bob, for your kind and beautiful words. I'm coming from a small town, Vilppula, and that's in Finland and in Northern Europe. Last week we had -25 degrees cold. That is about -15 Fahrenheit. It's cold. But it makes our racing, that our race season is short. We don't have very many races. So the progress in racing isn't easy to do. One of the very earliest friends of us is Don Bender. And thanks to him, you have helped us a lot. And then once you said that you know 2 young, talented guys, Bobby and Dom, and you introduced them to come to help us. And thanks to that, our crew chief, Sami, got some new equipments, and we learned how to use them. And that was like a next step to our racing. You all know the secret of success, and that is the good team. And I guess I don't have to tell you guys that, because everyone knows that it's all about teamwork. I'm blessed to have a husband who shares this passion, drag racing passion, with me, Tommy. We have 2 kids, Hanna and daughter Hanna and son Heikki, and they have been grown up in the smell of nitro. And I think that's a good environment. And Bobby said once to me that a family that races together stays together, and that is true. I'm very honored. It is a great honor for me to have this nomination. This is a great honor for my family, for Tommy, Hanna, Heikki, to my mom and dad, to my sisters and their families. This is a great honor for my team. Over the years, I have had a lot of crew guys and crew members, and each and every one of you have done a tremendous work for our success. And especially, I would like to send a special thanks to my first crew chief, Simo Patoharju. This is a great honor for European drag racing. This is great honor for European top fuel racing. And this is a great honor for lady racers around the world. So I want to thank you for this, and this means a world to me. Thank you, Big Daddy, and thank you, everyone.
Congratulations once again to Anita. It is a rare thing to surprise Big Daddy Don Garlits. This man could not be surprised over the course of his career. He was the guy that surprised people with his innovations mechanically, his performances on the racetrack. But tonight, sir, we have a surprise for you. I'd like to welcome 4 generations of the Garlits family to the stage, please. Four and a half if you count him.
Well, I'm Donna. I'm the youngest daughter. Got my son Rodney, and my sister Aylin, and her daughter Kirsten. These were the first 2 grandchildren born to mom and dad. And then we have Rodney's son, which are 4th generation, Braden. And we have a special thing to honor Dad with tonight. Not only is this the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame night, but this is also 50 years of the Don Garlits Museum of Drag Racing. Pat and Don Garlits were in England in 1976, racing at Sanapod when Lord Edward Montague invited Pat and Don to visit his Bewley National Motor Museum. Seeing the history of the motorsport displayed, they had the idea of starting a museum, originally to display Don's dragsters. Upon returning to the United States, they built the first museum building next to their home in Seffner. I used to clean the cars in there for gas money. In 1982, the museum was moved to Ocala, and construction began on a new 15,000 square foot building. In 1984, Pat and Don opened the first museum of its kind to commemorate drag racing history from the beginning to current day. The museum now houses not only Don's dragsters, but vehicles of other drag racing legends and pioneers. The Don Garlits Museum of Drag Racing in 2026 celebrates 50 years of the hard work, dedication, and vision of Pat and Don Garlits. And Daddy, if you would come to the stage, we have a little something for you.
An amazing timeline honoring the history and the 50 years of the Don Garlits Museum of Drag Racing, a place that has ensconced legends and continues to ensconce legends every year. We'll be right back.
Coming up, Founders Award winner Pennzoil Bob Smith. But next, a multi-time and current world champion tuner enters the hall. Steve Boggs has his moment at the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame induction ceremony presented by the Peltzman family. And it's brought to you by Roy Hills Drag Racing School since 2004. Wins since 2022, a great tradition in motorsports. And Summit Racing Equipment since 2002. Thank you, Summit, tonight's ring sponsor. Summit Racing Equipment, we appreciate you for supporting the rings in tonight's ceremony.
At Eagle Lights, we're off-road and motorsport enthusiasts at heart, and one of the largest aftermarket LED headlight manufacturers in the world. Manufacturing the highest quality LED headlights and motorcycle lights possible. At EagleLights.com, you can find the right size lights with the right connectors the first time without guessing, so you can buy and use Eagle Lights with confidence. Eagle Lights, finely crafted LED lighting solutions. See and be seen.
Streetcar Brawl at US 41 Drag Strip. Real street cars, real drivers, and real street-style racing. Speed, power, pressure. Racing the way it ought to be. Bring your car, bring your friends, or grab a spot in the stands and watch it all go down. Streetcar Brawl at US 41 Drag Strip, Morocco, Indiana. Get details and the full schedule at raceus41.com.
And we are back here in Gainesville, Florida. It is the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame 2026 induction ceremony. We got some neat stuff here. The 2026 t-shirts, if you want to grab one of these babies, we have these. We have commemorative glasses. They're available in the Hawthorne room just next to us if you'd like to get one by the end of the evening. A couple of more thank yous. The first one, a sincere thank you to the Pelsman family. They have been longtime supporters of Don Garlits, longtime supporters of the museum, and their support continues to allow great gatherings like this one to happen. So thank you to the Pelsman family. Also, thank you to Roger Brogdon and his new Vision One hand cleaner brand, one of our proud sponsors of tonight, and certainly a product that a lot of racers will be getting used to over the course of this 2026 season. Now, this broadcast will air on April 30th. You'll be able to find it April 30th, and it will be on the Racer Network and Rev TV in Canada. It will also air on Revin, which will be right around that April 30th window. But Racer Network will carry this broadcast on April 30th for those of you that want to tune in from home. We need to continue on with our program now, and this time we go back to Jack Beckman, who's taken the place of Don Garlits in our intro videos this year. Don thought it was time, and he's doing a heck of a job, so let's meet our next inductee.
It's fair to say that Steve Boggs' fingerprints are all over the most successful vehicles in both top alcohol funny car and top alcohol dragster. Steve's innovations in the class are legendary, and so is the performance of the cars he has tuned. He wins races, championships, and sets records, and he's done this for over 3 decades. Who better to present to Steve Boggs than his driver, the defending and 5-time top alcohol funny car champion, Sean Bellemure.
Yeah, this will be easy. Follow Don Garlits on stage, right? You know, I feel like the acronym, the GOAT, greatest of all time, seems to be overused these days. And I mean, tonight is a perfect example. Every inductee here, first of all, congratulations to you all, but each of you could be classified in some form as the GOAT. So maybe this next inductee is considered the GOAT of all goats when it comes to tuners. Sorry, Mr. Tobler, but that's my opinion. So does that make him the king goat of tuners, or maybe the top goat? Steve, you're definitely not the tallest goat, but at a self-proclaimed 5'7", maybe minus an inch or two, he's probably the fiercest and most feared I've ever met. And I'm gonna start with actually a recent story. We were in Charlotte a few years ago running the alcohol funny car, and a racer came by to buy some parts from us, and he went in the trailer with Steve, and they went in to negotiate a deal, and needless to say, it didn't go well. A few minutes go by, sliding glass doors open up, this racer goes out, walks about 10, 15 feet, turns around, screams back into the trailer, "Who the F do you think you are?" And out came 6'6" Steve Boggs. He stood on that stair and said, "I'm Steve Mother effing Boggs." That was the PG version. Needless to say, this racer turned around and walked away before there was further trouble, but that right there shows the intensity of this man. Now to the beginning. Steve Boggs' first race car was actually built out of 2x4s, some wagon wheels, and a lawnmower engine. He was 13 at the time, and his younger brother Ronnie was 10. In fact, Steve tells me to this day, "I crashed that thing and I still got a goddamn scar on my heel." Steve, that was probably a pretty good indicator that day that Ronnie was better off being the driver and you probably better off being the tuner. But in 1965, the Boggs brothers officially started their drag racing endeavors. This was after a few years of, street racing their way through high school and so on. So they built a nice, easy, simple to run, no big deal injected nitro 800. But in 1973, it was time to get serious. They bought their first funny car. It was an AMX-bodied, blown alcohol, double B funny car, and somebody decided first time out it'd be a good idea to rent a trailer, load it up at their farm in Ohio, and drive it all the way to Wisconsin for a UDRA race. By the way, Bob Frey, I thought I was gonna be the first to mention UDRA tonight. Thanks a lot. Well, in the middle of the tech inspection for this race, the tech officials set off the only fire bottle they had. So needless to say, Q1 was missed. So they finally found a fire bottle and went up for Q2. And I'm going to tell the rest of this story in my best Steve Boggs impression because it's the only way it can be done. Now remember these numbers, Sean. By the way, that's not far off. Wait till he comes up and talks to you. Low ET for double B funny car was 797. Got it? We unload that mother effer and run a 754. That's 4/10, Sean. Yes, it was. That was the first run, by the way. So, of course, they weren't allowed to touch the car afterward. All the teams went down. In fact, they shut the race down. So they all pile around, and of course, they were screaming. And the obvious thing, well, it's got to have nitro in it. So they took some fuel out of the fuel tank. They placed it into a Boone's Farm bottle, you know, to keep things official. And they passed this bottle around, and some of them smelled it, some of them tasted it. Yeah, no nitro. Well, then the next obvious one, well, it's got to be too light. Well, Ronnie, who's considerably bigger than Steve, jumped up on the roof of the funny car, ran down where the roof hatch was, jumped over the windshield, over the blower, ran down the hood of the body and off the front bumper. That AMX body was a tank, and needless to say, no, they weren't too light. So the fellow racers, they gave up and off they went. And my favorite part of this story is Steve leaned over to Ronnie and said, thing is that was the first run. I don't even know if that was good or not. 4/10 of a second. That same thing just about happened 1 year ago right here in Gainesville, Florida. We built an injected nitro funny car, and the quickest time ever had been 5:45 for an injected nitro funny car. On the second full pass in testing, we went 5:28 at 283 miles an hour. So if anybody's questioning Steve, if he still got it, Steve Boggs still got it. By the way, we went #1 qualifier today too, so good job, Steve. So I asked Steve when I was interviewing him what his proudest achievement has been in drag racing. And he said, well, one race, now listen to this combination. He and his brother Ronnie, beautiful car, front engine, candy apple red. The problem with it was it didn't know whether it was going to be a short front engine dragster with a rear end in the wrong place or a long funny car. It was a mess, but it was 150 inches long, injected nitro with nitrous, yes, NHRA allowed that at the time, that ran in top alcohol dragster. And they went to the 1989 US Nationals, and they beat one of the most feared alcohol dragster racers of the time in Bill Barney first round. Second round, they beat Steve Faria, who was the first in the fives and a West Coast hitter, and then ultimately bowed out in the semifinals against Tom Conway. That story goes right along with the next question I asked him is, what footprint do you want to leave behind in this industry? And his answer to that was really cool. And he said, Sean, I want everybody to remember that I kicked everyone's ass with something that isn't supposed to work. Well, think about his proudest moment. Wasn't one of his wins, wasn't a world championship, which he's got plenty of. It was beating people and being competitive with something that nobody else had even tried, let alone made successful. It's pretty cool stuff. Statistically, we're guessing he has somewhere between 100 to 120 national event wins. We were on a road trip one time, we lost count, we couldn't even remember it. I enlisted the help of Phil Burgess, and we kind of lost count too. So he has at least 8 world championships. The most dominant nostalgia top fuel dragster I've ever seen, because it whipped my butt a few times. He has world records in injected nitro dragster, injected nitro funny car, blown alcohol funny car, nostalgia top fuel dragster, altereds, boats. What am I missing? Mud bog. Nostalgia. I said nostalgia, Steve. Come on now. He's tuned for the names like Tony Bartone, Rick Jackson, Joe Penland, Morgan Lucas, and more. Now, Steve will admit that his career changed in 1992 when Tony Bartone hired him. And Tony said it best. Steve's success comes from a commitment to tuning and problem solving like nobody's ever seen before. He spends every waking second thinking about that car, making it better, making it faster. So anybody who's ever talked to Steve on the phone, you know what I'm talking about. And I can second that because when I first started driving for Tony Bartone, the team let me know of a rule that the laptop was not allowed to be taken back to the hotel at night because, number one, he was pissing off his roommate being up all night looking at the race pack, and number two, the man needed some sleep. But that's why I have every one of my national events and every one of my national championships to thank you for, Steve, and the team. Steve, I know Ronnie was a big part of your drive and your love for this, and he would be so proud of you. So with that said, it's my absolute honor to introduce to you the fiercest, most competitive 5'7" minus 1 or 2 inches person I know, the goat of all goats in my eyes, and he's a hero, a craftsman, a role model, best damn teammate and friend I could ever ask for, Steve Boggs.
Well, doesn't sound like there's too much to say. Well, I started racing with my brother 64 years ago. And I raced with him up until 1990, and he finally quit. So I was helping other people as we went along. I was working on 2 funny cars over here, a dragster over here, and then, I forgot what I was going to say. I'm 82. So my brother decided to quit, and I went to Gainesville, Florida in 1992, and I was looking for a better job. I was helping 2 other guys with funny cars, but I wasn't real happy. So, unbeknownst to me, Tony Bartone was there, and he had his funny car, and 2 weeks before that, they had released their crew chief. So somebody come to me and said, hey, Tony's looking for somebody. So I said, well, you go tell him, see if he wants me to come over and talk to him. The guy come back, said, yeah, I'll come over and talk to him. So I went over, lose my microphone here. So I went over and we sat in the trailer. I talked to him and his brother for probably 1 hour. We struck a deal, and that's when things really changed for me as my career moved forward. Tony had the money, he had the people, he had the good parts, and we had a motto. He said, you tune it and I'll drive it. So we started, and about 2 weeks later, and that year, I don't know if he'd even won a national event up to that point, but that year we won either 5 or 6 national events, a couple regional races, and kept going after that up until 2000. We set the ET record in Reading, Pennsylvania, and Tony told me he was talking about going and driving a fuel funny car. I said, well, sounds good. So he went with Jerry Tolliver in 2001 and drove his car that year. Well, I went on and helped a couple other people, and we always stayed in contact. Me and Tony never lost contact. So in 2002, he came back and drove his brothers a fuel car. So they was racing it, and I was helping other people, and he gave me a call. He said, hey, can you come over here and help these guys with this A fuel car? I said, Tony, the last time I run one of those things, I had an 8-gallon fuel pump and a 3-amp magneto. Now they got 44-amp mags and 60-gallon fuel pumps. I said, oh, I got a bunch of ideas. He said, perfect, because they don't have any. So we raced. Okay. lost where I was at. 82, I got an excuse. We raced that car the rest of the year. That was 2002. 2003, Tony built a brand new A-fuel dragster. Murph McKinney built it for him. And in 2003, we run the car all year. The first race of the year, we went to Pomona and set the new ET record. Then we won that race. Then we went to Gainesville and set the speed record. So now Tony owns the alcohol funny car record, the alcohol dragster, ET, and speed record. Didn't hold the speed record in funny car. Manzo got to hang on to that. So we raced that car that year, and at the end of the year, Tony decided to go to work with Jim Dunn, driving his fuel funny car. So I went on and went to work for a guy named Mitch Meyer. He was from Hermiston, Oregon. And so Tony left, and I went with Mitch Meyer, and I knew after I'd been there about, 4, 5, 6 weeks, I probably was gonna, the only reason I stayed, he had a real good team. So we run the car most of the year. He's won, he either won 5 or 6 national events, some regional races, and at the end of the year, everybody kept telling me, you can't do this with the tune-up in one of them A-fuel cars. I said, I'm sick of them telling me. So we went to Vegas and Pomona, and Bill Reichard was about 6 points ahead of us for the World Championship that year. I'd done this, wasn't gonna work. Well, I knew it'd work, but I didn't know what was gonna happen, so I changed it. That thing went out there, and we won, I think, a 5:24 in Vegas, won that race, went to Pomona, and I told Tony, he was driving Jim Dunn's car. I said, this car is gonna run in the teens. He said, yeah, right. I said, wait and see. So we go up to make the first run and smoke the tires. We come back to make the second run. Stepped on the throttle. Now the air is a lot better and the conditions are a lot better in Pomona than they were in Las Vegas. Stepped on the throttle. This thing goes 511. Woo, Tony says, you lied. That thing went right past the teens. So now we go down the first round. Man, I said, you know, we don't need to run 5:11, 12. I said, this is what you really knew about an A-fuel car. I said, I'm gonna back this thing off so I only have to run. I said, I'm gonna try to run a 5:25. I told all the guys on the team, this thing, we need to slow it down, and I can tell you what, the guy in the other lane, he had qualified 16th with a 5:56. I said, I'm gonna slow this car down to 5:25. So we go up there first round, I got this all figured out. Stepped on the throttle and it goes 5:10. And we set the new national record and went on and went around Bill Reichard, and he won the world championship with that car that year. And then after that, I worked for Rick Jackson, I worked with Morgan Lucas, Dwayne Shields, while Tony was driving the car for Jim Dunn. And in 2009, Tony would come back to alcohol, and Von Smith was driving Rick's car, and we'd won quite a few races. So Von quit and went to Qatar to drive over there a pro mod. Tony says, well, I'll drive it if you want me to. So him and Rick Jackson got together, and we raced with Rick up until, I gotta get the year right here, up until 2014. And we didn't have a falling out, but we decided to split ways. So Rick parked the car for a while, and Tony built a new car. And the next year, we brought that car out, and he drove it. And then in the meantime, in 2013, Tony's brother built a Nostalgia Top Fuel car. And he wanted Tony to drive it and me to tune it. So while we're building this funny car, we run this dragster. We won. The first year wasn't real good. It took me a little while to get a handle on this thing. So then the second year, the car wasn't handled, and we decided if Tony can't drive it and I can't tune it, we need a new race car. So Murph McKinney built us a new car. That was the answer. We got that new car, won 3 championships in a row, run low 550s, one run 74.79. I remember the numbers. And so then at the end of that, in 2016, Bob Frey was in Bowling Green and gave my brother and myself a lifetime achievement award, which I thought was really nice, but my brother had passed away in 2010. So then we kind of decided it was too much to try to run the funny car and the nostalgia car. So we built a new alcohol car, and Tony drove it for about a year and a half, and he drove cars so long that his neck and his back vertebrae was getting messed up, and he was driving in pain, and he had decided to get out of the car. So he said, well, put Mickey Farrell in it. We got 4 races to go. Put Mickey Farrell in it. So Mickey drove it 3 races, won 2 of them, but told us ahead of time, he said, I can't drive Dallas, Texas. Tony says, who are we going to get to drive it? I said, you don't worry about it. I got somebody. Sean Belmere. Tony looked around. He wasn't sure. He knew he'd raced him, but I said, you don't worry. You don't have to worry. He can drive that race car. So Sean showed up in Dallas. He had been to 7 national events and was runner-up. First time he got in that car, he won Dallas, won his first national event. So we wanted him to drive it the next year. But his dad's 50th anniversary of racing, he promised his dad he'd race with him. So we put somebody else in it, and it didn't work out. So Tony says, what are we going to do? I said, I don't care if Sean can only drive it half a season. It's better than what we're doing now. So we put Sean in it, and he was doing, I mean, he is one hell of a driver. So after Give me a second here. Okay. Now, in 2017, we wanted Sean to drive it. That's when his dad was 50th year. So we put somebody else in it. That didn't pan out very well. So Sean come back halfway through the year, drove it again several times. I think we ended up 5th in the points. And then in 2018, Sean come back to drive it full time. And there's no doubt in my mind, I'm up here right now because of Tony Bartone, Sean Belmere, and our crew, and myself. And it's a team effort here to win. It's a team effort. No one person can do this for themselves. And Tony put together, he's one of the best owners ever. We got one of the best drivers ever and one of the best crews, and I wouldn't trade him for anybody, and I do okay. So, but I forgot something to start with when I started. I want to thank the Don Gartlett's Museum, Chuck that works for him, for sponsoring this event, Steve Gibbs, an International Drag Racing Hall of Fame committee that voted for me, and everybody here that races knows this. Our families put up with a lot. We're going all the time. We're talking racing all the time, and my family's here, friends, my son, granddaughter, wife, brother-in-laws, a lot of friends that still come to the races, people that I knew when I was a kid. They're here tonight. They follow us around the country. They don't go to all of them. They come to Indy and Norwalk and those places, and people still follow me. And I just want to thank the families of any drag racer that pay the price of their loved ones being gone from Thursday till Monday, 20, 25 times a year, testing, working on the car, and it's really appreciated. And then I want to say one more thing I just thought about. I want to tell you something. Back in the 60s, started racing in 62, used to go to Indianapolis. Back in the 60s and 70s, and Don Gartletts was one of the most intriguing people. He drove people into them racetracks. They couldn't wait to see him run. They couldn't wait to get back to watch him run again. And he has probably done more for the drag racing sport than anybody in the world. Love you.
Coming up soon on the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame induction ceremony presented by the Peltzman family, a nitro icon with world championships in top fuel and funny car that span the centuries, Ron Tobler enters the Hall of Fame. But next, The factory hot rods iconic duo, David Reher and Buddy Morrison, have their moment at the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame. And it is all brought to you by Hengstifer's Metalworking Lubricants since 2019. And the NHRA, the National Hot Rod Association, celebrating their diamond anniversary. Happy 75th season, NHRA, and thank you, Wally Parks, for your vision.
At Lincoln Electric, innovation is at the heart of everything we do. Introducing Power MIG 262P, the ultimate pulsed MIG machine. We're dedicated to making your welding experience easier, more productive, and more efficient. As the world leader in advanced welding and cutting solutions, we offer an unparalleled lineup of innovative products. Lincoln Electric, where innovation meets excellence.
Have you ever dreamed of getting behind the wheel of a dragster, a high-powered door slammer, or even a funny car? Are you a racer looking to improve your skills, upgrade your license, or acquire a champion's mindset? Since 1985, Frank Hawley's Drag Racing School has been the world's premier venue for all that and more. Thousands have graduated. Now it's your turn. Led by multi-time NHRA champion Frank Hawley and instructed by drag racing champions, the school is open to all with any level of experience. Visit frankhawley.com to learn more about options like the dragster experience, group events, and more. That's frankhawley.com.
And we are back here in Gainesville, Florida, continuing on with our 2026 International Drag Racing Hall of Fame induction ceremony presented by the Peltzman family. Once again, thank you for their support. Pat Baltus is a huge part of a lot of things that go on with this event and around the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame. She recently had a fall. She was unable to attend tonight. Pat, we know you're watching from home. We wish you could be here. We look forward to seeing you in person next year. And a reminder, April 30th is the air date for this broadcast. It will air on the Racer Network and Rev TV Canada. It will also appear on Revin at just about that same time frame around April 30th. Drag racing is unique in motorsports because it is a sport that really fosters partnerships. Scarlett's and Malone was a huge one. We can go through history and name multiple big names, but few were bigger than Reher and Morrison.
If you're a fan of the bow tie and you like horsepower, the names Reher and Morrison are synonymous with success on the racetrack. David Reher and Buddy Morrison, partnered since 1971, made an enormous impact on the sport. Over that time, they've racked up national event wins and world championships in both pro and sportsman classes, as well as winning national championships in both the IHRA and the NHRA. When people said nobody could stop the Glidden juggernaut, it was Reher and Morrison who did it, not once, not twice, but 4 years in a row with driver Lee Shepard. Reher and Morrison continue to supply horsepower to literally hundreds of race-winning drivers across the country. Presenting for David Reher and Buddy Morrison, Bobby Bennett.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Garlitz, for having this. I'd like to talk to you about three college buddies that had more interest in running fast and winning drag races than shotgunning beers or whatever else college buddies did. I'd also like for you to create a vision in your head, and it all ties this together. The year was 1980. There was a 12-year-old kid sitting glued to his black and white television watching the Diamond P syndicated broadcast from the 1980 Gator Nationals. It was months after the NHRA Gator Nationals had completed, but this kid, so eaten up with drag racing, was glued to that black and white television screen. As the legendary Dave McClellan described the action, and now for the factory hot rods. This was a day and time that it was the factory hot rods. A Plymouth Arrow in the left lane and a Chevrolet Camaro in the right lane rolled out to the water box at Gainesville Raceway. There was a gentleman standing behind the Chevrolet Camaro, had a rag in his back pocket, watching action, no emotion, just watching his car. Bob Glidden and Lee Shepard were those drivers. Engines racing, 50-pound flywheels winding up like your grandmother's rotary telephone. Greatest sound in drag racing. Now, Reher and Morrison, mind you this, they had won the Winter Nationals, but they did so beating Glidden when he broke. In those days, essentially, the only chance one had to beat Bob Glidden was for him to break or make one of those rare mistakes. But there was something different about this time, this 1980 Gator Nationals. Shepard left on Glidden, and the Mopar couldn't catch up. That Camaro kept pulling, and the Mopar kept trailing. Shepard took the win, 851 to an 851. I didn't even have to research that number. I remembered it. Because I was that 12-year-old that took my mother's box, you know, the big box cassette things, and recorded that broadcast. And Lord forgive me, I recorded over one of her church sermons. But for every kid like me, there were thousands of drag racing fans who had finally seen their pro stock messiah arrive. Now, for those of you who do not know David Reher, the late Buddy Morrison, and the late Lee Shepard, they were not about fanfare. I can tell you that the least thing on their mind when they were winning races was getting in the Hall of Fame. They just wanted, get out of my way, I want the left lane. They were about winning. They gave passionate pro stock fans a reason to believe bow ties could compete again and beat the seemingly unbeatable Ford. How popular was the Reher Morrison name? For almost 4 seasons, their biggest sponsor were t-shirt sales. Imagine that. They sold enough t-shirts to fill the pro stocker. If only we could do that today. Woo. They won wherever they went. They won when they wanted to, and they won when they didn't want to, regardless of the sanction. And I will say this, with what journalistic integrity I have, they should have been the 1980 NHRA champions. But that's not because of what happened in Ontario, but that's a story for another day. In 1981, they left no doubt as Shepard won the first of the 4 championships in NHRA. So dominant was the Reher Morrison team, the ruling pro stock, that they won the IHRA and NHRA titles 2 seasons. The undisputed pro stock champions of the world. When David asked if I was interested in presenting him, I immediately went back to that moment in my mind when I heard Shepard wins over and over. Shepard wins on that worn out cassette tape. As if any of us could have envisioned where life would take us all. Now for David Reher, Buddy Morrison, Lee Shepard, and Bruce Allen, this is an honor that they will cherish for a lifetime. But those of us who knew David Reher, Buddy Morrison, Lee Shepard, and Bruce Allen, we knew this is where they would end up anyway. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to present to you a hero of mine, David Reher.
And thanks to Don Garlitz for the opportunity. I only talked to Don Garlitz one time in my life, and I remember that being 1975 up at a Denver race. He had all the reasons on his trailer door for tire shake. And that enough said there. We started, went to Indy in 1971. That was the first time. But before that, I was a kid reading all the hot rod magazines. Heck, I even read a motor's manual from front to back. And I always wanted to do the racing thing. So Indy started it, We went up there against advice and ended up going to the semis in the eliminator after winning class. And after that thing started, the next week we set the demodified record to a 1096. And I'm just going to leave that there. We ran modified until 1977, and then we started going pro stock racing. And I got to give some credit to Don Ness. He revolutionized pro stock chassis. He's not with us anymore, but we built the first small block powered Camaro because it was a 108-inch wheelbase. We thought that'd be better than these little short Monzas, and so that it was. And as Bobby pointed out, we started out 1980 was probably the beginning of the exciting time. We won the first 3 national events and probably won the Winter Nationals with some luck. We won, as he told you, we won the Gators, and then we went on to the Cajuns, and we kept running this small block. And that was probably partially my fault because we had started building a big block, a small big block. And we thought, well, we won these races, maybe we should stick with this small block, which we had gotten it running pretty good because we converted our 3-link Ness car he helped us convert it to a 4-link, and it just worked better for us. And but we had been working on the big block, and I had a customer who had a Ford that we worked on. And I looked at those Ford heads and I said, we gotta build, we can't race a small block. Look at these heads. A small block can't compete with these heads, it's impossible. And the valve size they had and the ports and everything about them. And so we decided to build a big block. And we figured the only way the big block would work if it was real small. So we went and got a 348 crank, de-stroked it to 3160, and built a 362 with a 4150 bore. And we put that, we got all the parts, we got the heads done, but we didn't finish it. And so we went to the Cajun Nationals, and Bob Glidden had his arrow there again. And it's kind of the same thing happened at Gainesville. Lee got a slightly better light, and we won. And Glidden came down to us and said, you'll never see this arrow again. The next time you see me, I'm going to be back in my Ford. And we're driving home in the dually, and we said, we have got to get that big block run. We cannot run with his Fairmont. We know we can't. So we went and worked on that thing as fast as we could. We got it together and we put it on the dyno. But back then the dyno was a couple of Polaroid cameras watching fuel flow, watching the torque meter, and Buddy was running the dyno. And the first pull we made, we were like, that can't be right. Can't run like that. So we went and re-deadweighted the dyno, and the deadweighted perfectly right, and then it was how it ran. So we decided we got to go to there was a regional that weekend in Gulfport, Mississippi, that we've got to go to that race. Well, we had never set the car up for a big block, so we just turned some spools out on the lathe and where the motor plate set ahead of the mount, because we were still running the small block bell housing location. And we put it together and we went down there. And I went up to the tower in Gulfport, and they told me, well, Bob Glidden's been calling all day. And the first run we made was a new national ET and speed record. So things changed a lot, and we started winning races. Glidden couldn't outrun us, and we started winning quite a few races. So that was some of the most exciting time in our lives. Buddy, myself, and Lee. And because I felt like that was a revolution in pro stock, and Bill Jenkins had called us when we were building it. He said, "Why are you doing that? That won't work. Kevin Roddy's done it. Bernie Agaman's done it. Joe Satmer, they just won't run." Well, they all had 390-something inch motors or 400s, and so anyhow, that was a big part of my life, meant a lot. And I have to say it was probably the most exciting time. And business continued, and we had a tragedy and lost Lee, and then Bruce Allen came down and drove for us. I picked him, I really liked him. And he went on and won 17 more national events and a number of runner-ups. We retired in 2005 because the cost had gotten so high, but I'm thankful for the last 4 national events we won in 2000 and 2001. And rather than go year by year and blow by blow, I'm just going to leave it there. And I'm going to thank my wife, Beverly, for putting up with me, being gone all the time, and all the coming home from Seattle and then flying home on the all-night flight and then going back out to Sonoma and that kind of things. But I want to thank everybody in here, because without everybody here, drag racing wouldn't be possible. So, and once again, I want to thank Don Garlitz, and I look forward to going to his museum, which for some reason I haven't been to. I've known about it, but it was always in a big hurry to get home. As soon as Gainesville was over, it was in the truck and headed home. So anyhow, I'd like to leave it there, and I thank everybody.
Coming up, this crew chief won world championships in Top Fuel and in Funny Car. Ron Tobler enters the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame. But coming up next, Founders Award winner, Pennzoil Bob Smith. Once again, special thanks to the companies that make it possible here at the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame induction ceremony, presented by the Peltzman family, including TAC Enterprises since 2002. And Auto Imagery, all the photos you're seeing in tonight's show, provided by Richard Schutz Auto Imagery. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Auto Imagery.
In the high-performance world, saving weight is critical. You can save more than 40 pounds of unsprung weight with wheels from Lightspeed Racing. Lightspeed Racing makes the world's best lightweight performance wheels and accessories, including forged magnesium wheels, lighter than carbon fiber, better tensile and fatigue strength than forged aluminum. Lightspeed Racing, nearly endless colors and finishes, and 100% custom made. Choose record-setting, race-proven, custom wheels from lightspeedracing.com. You would never drive your car in the rain without windshield wipers, so why ride your motorcycle without one? When the sky opens up, your visor turns into a blur. You lift your hand, you lose control, you lose visibility. Biker Guard is the electric windshield wiper for your helmet. Biker Guard clears rain instantly, so your hands stay on the bars and your eyes stay locked on the road. Cars have wipers, trucks have wipers, now riders do too. Don't ride blind. Ride with Biker Guard. Get yours at bikerguard.com.
And we are back here in Gainesville, Florida, continuing on with the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame inductions for 2026. Now, this year's Founders Award winner is a bit of an interesting case. His name is Bob Smith, known as Pennzoil Bob Smith. We couldn't find a whole lot about Pennzoil Bob Smith, but what we do know about what Bob Smith did and what he helped build in the sport, the lifeblood of drag racing and any motorsport is, of course, sponsorship and innovation. And Bob Smith, who worked with Pennzoil as a field engineer and then a marketer and then a promoter in the sport of drag racing, was a guy who had an outsized impact. Even though we don't know a whole heck of a lot about him, we put Jack Beckman on the case.
The Founders Award is designed as a non-traditional inductee into the Drag Race Hall of Fame. Somebody that might not have been a crew chief or a driver, but still had an impact on the sport worthy of induction. This year's inductee, Pennzoil Bob Smith, was the man if you drove a race car that had Pennzoil in the crankcase. Everyone who ran Pennzoil knew Bob. From the 60s through the 70s, not only was he the guy that got you your oil, he was a world-class field engineer, he was a marketing guru, and he was a friend to many of the teams out there. Ladies and gentlemen, please offer a round of applause for this year's Founders Award winner, Bob Smith.
This is not a plot twist. I am not Bob Smith. He was unable to attend tonight. So we thank Bob for his contributions to the sport of drag racing, and certainly a man worthy to be in this hall and to be a receiver of the Founders Award. We gave away a door prize earlier when I had you look inside your programs for that Swamp Rat stamp. I got one more to give away right now. If you look at the welcome message, which you received on the way in, and you see the Don Garlett's signature on your welcome message, you will receive another of our International Drag Racing Hall of Fame portfolios, which you'll be able to pick up at the close of the evening in the Hawthorne Room.
When we come back, our final inductee. He crew chiefed legends Shirley Muldowney, Cruz Pedregon, and Ron Capps to world championships at the highest levels of drag racing. Ron Tobler enters the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame. A huge thank you to the companies who make it possible for the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame induction ceremony presented by the Peltzman family to take place in Gainesville each year, including Summit Motorsports Park since 2016. Thank you, Bader family. Stewart's Cycle. And the International Hot Rod Association, sponsoring the classes commemorating this year's class of inductees. Thank you, IHRA.
Streetcar Brawl at US 41 Drag Strip. Real street cars, real drivers, and real street-style racing. Speed, power, pressure. Racing the way it ought to be. Bring your car, bring your friends, or grab a spot in the stands and watch it all go down. Streetcar Brawl at US 41 Drag Strip, Morocco, Indiana. Get details and the full schedule at raceus41.com.
At Eagle Lights, we're off-road and motorsport enthusiasts at heart, and one of the largest aftermarket LED headlight manufacturers in the world. Manufacturing the highest quality LED headlights and motorcycle lights possible. At EagleLights.com, you can find the right size lights with the right connectors the first time without guessing, so you can buy and use Eagle Lights with confidence. Eagle Lights, finely crafted LED lighting solutions. See and be seen.
For the better part of 50 years, drag race fans have become accustomed to seeing Ron Tobler standing behind one of his race cars on the starting line. Few people actually know that back in the 1970s, Ron actually earned his Top Fuel license. There are many drivers who are eternally thankful that Ron decided to give up the steering wheel for the wrenches, myself included. Ron is one of the few crew chiefs in history to bag Top Fuel and Funny Car World Championships as a crew chief. There were also many of us sad to see Ron retire, but that didn't last long. He's still out coming to the races, though not on a full-time basis, and he's lending his tuning skills to a Top Fuel dragster and a Nitro Funny Car. And now, he earns his rightful place in the class of 2026. Presenting for Ron Tobler, the man with the second best voice in this room, Ryan Loans.
All right, Jack, that was all right. That was pretty good. Not quite voice of an angel, but you're getting there. Ron will be our final inductee tonight, and it is a special honor that when I got the phone call from him, it really it lands, and I thank you for this honor, Ron, to be able to speak of you tonight. I hold this man in the highest regard. He has won more than 70 national events as a crew chief, 4 championships, and this is a guy who answered the siren's call of drag racing as a 16-year-old kid. It's an incredible story. It's a dream story. It's an American success story, and it's the story that I love to tell other people when they ask about my favorite people in the sport of drag racing. He stands in very elite and very lonely company in this sport, one of only 4 crew chiefs, as Jack mentioned, to have championships in Top Fuel and Nitro Funny Car. The numbers are boring, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on the numbers because drivers are interesting. Some drivers are interesting, some more than others. But crew chiefs are fascinating. Crew chiefs are actually more fascinating than drivers because we can understand the drivers. Even a guy like me, a guy like Bob Frey, who I've never wanted to hit the gas in a nitro car, you never wanted to do that, but we can understand the driver a little bit. We can understand that isolation of being in a race car. You hit the gas, the feeling that the driver must experience, the noise, the fame, such that it is, all the trappings that come with being the front man of the band. But the driver relies on his machine to do his job. And what makes the crew chief fascinating is that the crew chief relies on the people to make that machine operate. So a crew chief, as much as he is all the things on a team, a leader, a mechanic, and everything else, he provides a whole different service to that race team than a driver ever possibly could. You need to train a group of people, you need to hire a group of people, you need to build them into a unit, you need to make them work as one, and you need to make them do it better than the people who are sitting on the other side of the racetrack. And it's gonna be hot, and it's gonna be garbage, and one guy's probably gonna drink too much the night before, and God forbid he gets into a fist fight with his roommate that night, and you gotta go bail him out of the jail. I mean, the crew chief has to deal with a lot, including dealing with the drivers, Ron and Jack and Austin and others. Ron Tobler was a kid when he moved from California to Houston, Texas. He grew up in Southern California. He had to have seen a Top Fuel dragster or race car before, but Southwest Tire and Brake, or Southwest Brake Service, was a small auto shop you would pass by going to and from school. Inside that auto shop was a Top Fuel dragster. And every day you'd look at it a little more, and the stairs became pauses, and the pauses became peaks in the door, and the peaks in the door became enough that the guy that ran the garage said, "Why don't you just come inside and look at the car?" The guy's name was Dick Venables. And so Mr. Venables saw this kid who was motivated and interested, and he invited him back, probably to hold tools or sweep the floor, or do the stuff that you let kids do in a workshop. But over time, the kid showed some motivation. And Steve Stevens and Dick Venables ran a pretty tidy, efficient, modest Top Fuel operation that really could have benefited from some unpaid child labor. And they found it in this kid named Ron, who had just come from California and saw their car in the shop. So he got to drive in the dually, and he got to pull around the Zudi Chaparral trailer. And when those guys had a few too many beers to drive the dually in the Chaparral trailer, well, that 16-year-old kid that liked looking at the dragster became a truck driver. And when they ran out of gas, they handed him a gas can and told him to go a couple miles down the road, and by the time he got back, they had finished all the beer. He filled up the gas tank, and they ended up driving down the road. The other kid that was involved in that workshop was Dick's son, Dickie. That bond that these two guys formed as kids survives to this night, a mutual love of drag racing, a friendship, a brotherhood that sees them sitting at the same table in the front row tonight. It is one of the best stories in the sport because they're both champions, because of the humble roots, because where they came from, and because they have this everlasting gift of lifelong friendship and brotherhood. So we can look about and talk about what Ron Tobler has accomplished on the racetrack, and we can kind of wonder why and how. How did he do it? And when you ask about a crew chief, you ask a crew chief how he did something, it's not like asking a magician about how the magician performed the trick. It's not about asking the guy how he pulled the rabbit out of the hat. Because this is a job that is so all-encompassing, it takes so many different aspects of attention and detail to succeed at. It's not how he performed the trick, it's in the methods of how he perfected his ability to perform the trick. You know, Ron Tobler is an interesting case because he's a guy that learned this trade from the ground up. And that kind of organic learning, that organic leadership skills he probably learned from a guy with a little repair shop in Houston, Texas, are the same leadership skills he applied to become a 4-time world champion. So the interesting thing about a crew chief in drag racing, it's not a lead mechanic, it's not a head engineer, it is crew chief. And this is a tribal job. These are tribes, and this is their leader. And Ron's leadership style was pretty fantastic because he set an expectation and expected his people to live up to the expectation. If you didn't, it wasn't going to work for you there. But if you did, you were going to win, you were going to have a good time doing it. Because as long as the sole focus of work was what you did when work was needed to be done, when it came time to have some fun, Ron's all about having some fun. We've all had a lot of fun with Ron in the best of ways. Some of my best personal memories, and many of us in this room's personal memories, come from the famed wine nights that Ron so often hosted in his trailer. People would show up on a Saturday night, he'd bring some wine one week, or somebody else would bring some wine that week, and you'd get together and it was this rotating cast of characters, of people telling stories, drinking just enough or maybe a little bit too much, laughing. And we would set these attendance records. Those of you that have been inside a Top Fuel Trailers hauler, we had 23 or 24 people in this thing at times. It was like shoving people into a telephone booth. But the most fun part of all of it was looking over and seeing what it meant to him. He would always be smiling, and it was a feeling of a bond, a family, of all the right things. It speaks to his character as a man and as a person, a guy that I certainly admire, and a true champion and a true deserving member of this 2026 class of the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame. I will just say this, drivers are interesting, but crew chiefs, they are, for all these reasons, fascinating. A 16-year-old boy would grow up to become one of the greatest minds and successful champions in the sport's history. Doesn't get any better than that. Please let me introduce our final inductee tonight, a 4-time world champion, more than 70 national event victories as a crew chief, Ron Tobler.
How do you follow that? Public speaking is not one of my stronger suits, so I'm going to have to look at everything that I have on this device here. Give me 1 second. Good evening, everyone. I am both honored and humbled to be here with you all tonight. Thank you, Brian, for that incredible introduction. You've been a great friend, a help to me when I tried to do what you do, TV, and a frequent visitor to my wine nights in the Napa Lounge. When I chose my presenter, you were the only one on the list. I would like to thank Don Garlitz and the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame for recognizing my 5.5 decades of participation in the sport of drag racing. It has truly been my whole life's work. It is all that I have ever done as an adult. I would also like to thank all the family and friends, there are like 30 of them here, that came here to support me tonight at this induction. Some of them are here for the race. Some of them had to make the effort to travel to get here. I thank you all for being here. I would also like to congratulate my fellow inductees in the class of 26. Steve Boggs, been watching you for a long time. No one better at tuning an alcohol funny car. 6 championships, 5 with Sean, killer bees. Bob Frey, what can you say? One of the all-time great announcers, a walking stat guy, a true historian of the sport. Reher and Morrison, watched him race and pretty much dominate pro stock racing throughout the 80s. Anita Mäkelä, 3-time FIA Top Fuel World Champion, all deserving inductees. I want to start by giving you a list of names. Steve Stevens, Marvin Graham, Shirley Muldowney, Doug Coletta, Cruz Pedregon, Jack Beckman, Ron Capps, and Austin Prock. 6 out of those 8 names are world champions, 3 of which I was a crew chief for some of their world championships. Not a bad list. If you can't be successful with that list of drivers, then you have no excuses. Steve Stevens, by the way, was the driving partner of Dick Venables Sr. I have to start out by talking about my early days in this sport. This year will mark my 55th year of being involved in drag racing. Dick Venables Sr., as Brian said, is Dick Venables Jr.'s dad. I was 10 years older than Dickie, as we call him, when I met his dad at the age of 17. Dickie helped out with his dad's car through the 70s and early 80s. When Dickie graduated from high school in 1983, within probably a month, we came through Houston and snatched him up to work on Shirley's car. That was his first full-time job in drag racing. I will say that for myself and Dickie, working with his dad for the first 4 years of my racing endeavors was a time that they let this kid work on and taught me every aspect of a top fuel dragster. I was very much hands-on. As time went by, I was building short blocks while still a teenager, thanks to their helpful and patient instruction. They later acquired an alcohol funny car that they converted to fuel, so we would sometimes take both cars and compete with them on the same weekend. That was a challenge. The talk was that I wanted to drive the dragster, so Stevens would drive the funny car. So in '75, I started the licensing process in the dragster. I had never staged a race car or even a car and gone down the drag strip before until I jumped in and hit the gas in the top fuel dragster. You had to make 6 runs in. We made 5 in 1975, none of which went very well. Probably didn't get past 60 feet tire shake. I came back through Houston in 1977 after I went to work for Shirley, made my 6th run, a good one, pedaled down all the way through, got my license, 648, 218. Not a bad pro stock run these days. The last thing I will say about those formative years is that myself and Dickie, these 2 kids that came out of this front-end alignment shop, both went on to become crew chiefs. And between the 2 of us, we have won 150 plus NHRA national events and 8 world championships. It is because of Dick Venables Sr. that I am here tonight. These are the highlights from the first part of my career in this sport, 1971 to 2003. After I raced with Stevens and Venables through 1975, I was offered a job, my first full-time job in drag racing by a guy named Marvin Graham for the 1976 season. That was my first time racing the full NHRA national event schedule. Marvin had won Indy in 1974. I moved to OKC where he lived at his house, worked on the race car in his house garage while he repaired TVs. He was a TV repairman. At the end of '76, I left Marvin's employment. At that time, there was a 3-race series here in Florida called the Turkey Trots. I brought the Stevens and Venables dragster to Florida to get the car from race to race while Dick and Steve went home in between each race. In fact, if memory serves me right, I worked in between these races at Don's Speed Shop in Seffner. It was at one of these Florida races that Connie Coletta approached me about going to work with he and Shirley for the 1977 season. Of course, I accepted. And my first race with them was at the Winter Nationals that year. With Connie as crew chief, Shirley won her first NHRA World Championship in 1977. At the beginning of 1978, Shirley and Connie went their separate ways. Shirley approached me and asked me if I would like to be her crew chief. At 23 years old, I said, sure. That was my first time being a crew chief. For the next 2 seasons, 78 and 79, I just tried to learn the job, hone my skills, and just basically survive. In 1980 and 1982, we won 2 more NHRA World Championships as well as an IHRA World Championship in 1981. The last 13 years of my time with Shirley was mostly all match racing. Now I will highlight the second part of my career in this sport from 2004 through 2022. Without a doubt, was my most successful and happy time in the sport. Of my 72 career wins, 56 of them were from 2004 through 2022. When Shirley retired at the end of the '23 season, Connie 2003 season, Connie Coletta reached out to me again for the second time and hired me to come and be the crew chief on his nephew Doug's Top Fuel dragster. Now keep in mind that I've been doing pretty much everything on Shirley's car by myself for those 13 match race years. Now all of a sudden I'll be working with a team of 7 or 8 members. I didn't know how to deal with that. It was good to be back in a racing environment where I was provided the opportunity, the financial backing, and the team, and the infrastructure to go out and compete for race wins and championships again. Doug and our team, which was a great group of guys, finished second, third, and second in the points in those 3 years together, and of course, lost the championship on the run at Pomona to AJ and Tony Schumacher. We competed very strongly against that Army team for 3 of those years. Tony and AJ dominated the 2000s like Force Coyle and Bernie dominated the 1990s. Dougie and our team still hold the title of the quickest quarter-mile run ever, a 4:42 with a 0. I left Coletta's at the beginning of '07 and moved to Indy and accepted a position with Morgan Lucas Racing. And I was fired after 2 months. It was the first and only time in my career that I was fired, but it turned out to be a blessing. I had just relocated from Michigan to Indiana with my wife, Ellen, and I had no job. This happened in May, so I thought, I'm not going to jump at the first offer I might get. I wanted to take a couple of months to think about what I was going to do next. I was in Englishtown in June with my wife, who was working for the Fram Top Fuel team at the time, and Cruz Pedregon reached out to my wife, Ellen, and asked her if I could meet him at his motorhome in the motorhome lot in the middle of nowhere, okay? I realized after meeting why he wanted to meet in such a secluded spot. Cruz's crew chief at that time was a guy named Wayne Dupuis. And if any of you know Wayne, you will understand why Cruz wanted to be out where nobody would see us. Cruz offered me a job to come and crew chief his funny car. I assured Cruz that I knew absolutely nothing about funny cars. Us dragster crew chief in those days thought that they were stupid. He told me that he had the faith that I could adapt. So that offer was in June. I thought about it for a couple of months, and after another conversation with my friend Dickie, he told me that he would help me navigate the flopper world. And also, by the way, Dickie at that time was Tony Pedregon's crew chief, and the 2 brothers operated out of the same shop. So I was not in this by myself. So in Sonoma in August, I told Cruz that I would accept his offer and started with him in Indy of 2007. We ran the car just like he had it for the rest of the '07 season, and that winter, Cruz gave me the okay to get the parts and pieces to make the car my own. The first thing I did was go after a guy named Sean Dill, who was my car chief while I worked at Coletta's. And he came to be my crew chief on Cruz's car for the 2008 season. Someone told me once, the first rule as a crew chief is to surround myself with people that are smarter than me and let them do their jobs. This guy, Sean, was the epitome of that statement. Well, it worked out okay. We took most of the year to get acclimated to dealing with the funny car, but we did, and we won the last 3 races of the year to win the 2008 Funny Car Championship. And I also had a great team there that some of those guys went on to follow me to later teams in my career. At the end of '09, my second year with Cruz, I was approached by Don Schumacher to come to work for him. I asked him, I begged him, can I please get back on a dragster? Well, he didn't have any dragster openings. The only thing that he had was a funny car. He wanted me to come and run Jack Beckman's funny car team. I took a couple of guys with me from Cruz's with me, one of them being Dustin Heim. We'll get back to him later. Sean Dill did not go with me, but there was a guy named John Collins that would be my assistant crew chief on that team when I got there in 2010. Another example of working with people that are smarter than me. My gateway to all things DSR, I also brought a guy from Tony Pedregon's team named Tyler Troxell. He was with me till I retired. A very valuable member of our team, and a few guys that were with Beckman when I got there. This team largely was with me until I retired in 2021. We did okay with Jack that first year, 2010, winning 1 race. We came back for our second year in 2011 and had better results, winning 3 races and finishing second in the championship that year. At the spring race in Vegas, in early 2012, I was tapped by Don to run the Napa Auto Parts funny car with Ron Capps driving. My same team and my equipment. Ron just brought his fire suit and jumped into our car. Well, that was the start of the Ron and Ron show, as we called it. and the floodgates were opened up. Our first partial year together in 2012, we won 5 races and finished second in the championship to our teammate Jack Beckman, with Todd Smith making the calls for Jack when I left. I told Jack he would be just fine with Todd, and he was. Ron, myself, and our team won 33 races together in a little under 8 years. Highlighted with Ron's much-deserved first and long overdue Funny Car World Championship in 2016. We followed that up with a year in 2007 that was a benchmark for most of the people on our team. We won 8 races, went to 12 final rounds. Unfortunately, we lost the championship that year on the last day of the season to Robert Height and my good friend Jimmy Pratt, because we went out first round at the last 2 races. That was our bad. We didn't deserve it. We did, however, secure another second place finish for Ron that year. That year for us, results-wise, were almost the kind of numbers that this Proc team has been putting out there the last couple of years. I can say without a doubt, those years with Ron were by far my most satisfying, my most successful, and the most fun I ever had in the sport. We won together, we lost together. We were like a family. We had a lot of great wine nights, which were very popular during those years. Every Saturday night, opposing crew chiefs, other team crew guys, TV people, and a lot of people involved in the sport would come together and enjoy a glass of vino in my trailer, as Brian alluded to earlier. We won 37 races in my 10 years at DSR. Very proud of what we accomplished. I could not have done that without the 3 men who served as my assistant crew chiefs during those years. There was John Collins from 2010 when I got to DSR, and for the 4 years we worked together, he taught me so much. One of the smartest people I have ever met, great team leader and friend. In 2014, he was tapped by Don to be the crew chief, his first effort in a crew chief role on the funny car driven by Johnny Gray. He remained in that role with Johnny Gray and then Tommy Johnson until the end of the 2020 season and was very successful. The guy who took JC's place at the beginning of the 2014 season as my assistant crew chief was a guy named Eric Lane. Hop Sing, as everyone called him. He had formerly been Jimmy Proc's assistant on the AAA car with Robert Height. He was with us when we won the championship in 2016, and we had a great 2017 season together. We were together for almost 4 seasons, and we became very good friends, as did most people that ever met Eric. At the start of the 18 season, Eric was offered a job of being a crew chief for Bob Tasca. Again, somebody cherry-picking my assistant crew chiefs. I was very proud in the fact that he got the chance to be a crew chief and would have never stood in his way, but at the same time, I knew I would miss him dearly. Unfortunately, at the end of the 2020 season, a year that he had gone to work for Cruz Pedregon, Eric was killed in a highway accident, a major blow to all that knew him. I still think about him every day. Or Sean, my buddy Bellamere. You know what I'm saying. When Hopsing left to go to work with Tasca, I was again faced with the task of finding a replacement. I had just the guy, Dustin Heim. Now we're getting back to him. One of the people that came with me from Cruises to DSR. The same person I said earlier that we would talk about him later. I said that twice, sorry. Well, now is the time. I first met Dustin when I got to Cruises. He was about 23 or 24 years old, but way more mature than his years. He was hardworking, diligent, a born leader, cared about everything he did and the people he worked with. I guess you could say for those years, 2008 through 2017, he was most definitely what would you call my car chief. When John Collins left in 14, I offered Dustin the job of being my assistant, but he didn't think he was ready, even though I thought he was. So I told him that day in 2014, from that way forward, he was going to be involved with everything that Hop Sing and myself did every time we had a conversation about how to tune the car. He would be in on that conversation so he could learn and be ready the next time the opportunity came available. When Eric left, I also offered Dustin the position of assistant crew chief. He was ready. During the 18-19 and 11-race 2020 COVID-shortened season, we won 8 races, which year to year was on par with what we had done in the previous 7 seasons with JC and Eric. The fact is, of my 40 funny car wins, the only thing that was a constant is that Dustin was there for every one of them. He is truly the son I never had and one of my best friends. When DSR could not handle what COVID had done to his organization in 2020, our Napa team, as well as the John Collins-led Tommy Johnson team, were disbanded. I had plans to retire at the 2021 season, but with that the retirement happened at the end of 2020. I did not want to go out and start all over again somewhere else for only a year, and I certainly was not going to do it without my team. So I retired at the start of 2021. Don Schumacher was not only an employer, he gave me a great opportunity, provided me with the parts and people we needed to be successful, and I'm also proud to call him a friend. When I first went to work for Don in 2010, my wife and his wife became very close friends. I got to be included on many fabulous vacations with Don and his family. I was really just riding my wife's coattails, and that was okay with me. We went to the Dominican Republic many times with Don. He was quite the fisherman. I eventually caught my first marlin with Don, and we got to go to places like Turks and Caicos, Costa Rica, and just being welcomed to his house in Florida for a week at a time to enjoy golf, spend time with his family. He was a huge part of my life, and there is a day that doesn't go by that I don't think about him and want to talk to him. I moved from Indy to Huntington Beach, California, where my wife and I had planned on going when I retired. I enjoy and do enjoy my life now living there. Yes, I had offers to go back to work, but I gave them my stock answer. I'm not doing full-time anymore. But I was in Aruba, Christmas of 2021, with my wife Ellen, with some of our racing friends. One of those friends was Jimmy Prock. Jimmy said he thought Austin might be back. He said then, would you consider being a part of this? Well, I gave him my stock answer, I'd probably not be interested. After that conversation, before we went to dinner, I thought about his offer. Now Jimmy, my wife Ellen, and Jimmy's wife Jill are all best friends. And throughout our 15 years of living in Indy, we did a lot together. I have always respected Jimmy as a crew chief, even though we fiercely competed against each other all of my funny car career, and to know their sons Austin and Thomas, since they were like 10 years old. I thought, how cool would it be to race with Jimmy, to race with Austin, this kid I had watched drive midgets and sprints when he was a teenager, and his brother Thomas was going to be on the team also. So at this dinner, I looked at Jimmy and I told him that I would definitely be interested in joining this team. He was very excited. I was very excited. We started out the year with a runner-up finish at the Winter Nationals, but after that, to be truthful, we struggled through most of that year. I had not been around a dragster since my days with Dougie some 15 years earlier. But then we got our stuff figured out and won our first race together, and the first race of the countdown at Reading that year. And statistic-wise, we had the best car in the countdown. Our problem was that we sucked so bad in the middle of the year that we started the countdown in 12th place. That's a big hole to dig yourself out of. We won the most rounds in the countdown, won 2 races in the countdown, and was runner-up at a third. By the start of the World Finals at Pomona, we had clawed our way to number 6 in the points, and ended up in 3rd place when the World Finals were over after we beat Antron Brown in the final. It was definitely a mic drop moment for me after we ran career best for our team in the semis and beat Brittany and Grubby, who had just crushed all of us that year, and we ran 364 against them. We repeated that with another 364 against AB in the finals. I decided at Indy that year that I was not going to come back in 2023 because traveling back and forth to all these races from California was just too time-consuming and hard. I wanted to enjoy my retirement, but we had a great team together that year, and I don't regret a moment of it. After all these accomplishments and wins, let me make one thing clear, that none of this would have been possible without the people that made up the crews on these various teams. They are the ones who made all this happen. Their sacrifices, their dedication to their craft, their time away from their families, the birthdays, the holidays, the graduations they missed. None of us crew chiefs, not AJ, not Jimmy, not Dickie, not Austin Coyle and Bertie Federley, just to name a few, could have done any of this without these people, these friends, these brothers. They were always my main concern when it came to scheduling, travel times. I always tried to give them as much possible time off to be with their families, assuming all of our work was completed. They were not just employees, they were friends and family to me. We did everything together. Kids' birthday parties, boat rides, vacations. When we were not racing, we spent most of our time together. I have been very fortunate with this in my whole career. I've seen a lot of progression of these nitro cars. When I first started, we had 2 clutch discs, now we have 6. We had 671 superchargers, now we have 1471s. We had a 10-gallon fuel pump, now there are 120 gallons. People ask me after I retired, don't you miss racing? And I said, no, I miss the people. Now, I'm not totally out of the sport. For the last 3 years, I've been doing some consulting for 2 part-time teams. One is with TJ Zizzo's Top Fuel team, who is here tonight. TJ and his crew chief, Mike Kern, who's also here. They are from Chicago. One thing I particularly enjoy about racing with TJ is that we have been friends for over 20 years, and Dustin Heim and one of my old crew guys, Joan Chrisman, work on TJ's car as well. So I get to see them from time to time. TJ and his team always show up with a well-prepared car that is capable of being a top 5 qualifier every time out. The other is with a former multi-time nostalgia funny car world champion named Jason Rupert, a second generation who a few years ago wanted to go race a big show funny car. I have enjoyed teaching them how to race a modern day funny car, and they have been quick learners. He is from Southern California, where I live. It has been a great 55 years in the sport. I have made a lot of friends. Unfortunately, we have lost a few along the way. And last but certainly not least, I have to thank my wife, Ellen. I am constantly reminded of how lucky I am to have such an incredible woman by my side for the last 19 years. Her support isn't just a safety net. It's the foundation that allows me to dream bigger and reach further than I could ever imagined alone. Whether I'm facing a challenging day or celebrating a win, she is my most steadfast advocate and clearest voice of reason. Her love is quiet, powerful force that makes our home a sanctuary, and my life is infinitely better. We are enjoying traveling, spending time with friends, and making every day count. You know, I've seen so many things in this sport I cannot possibly cover tonight, so who knows? Maybe one day I'll write a book. Thank you and good night.
And so our closing remarks tonight will come from the man himself, Big Daddy Don Garlits, making his way to the stage to close out this evening. A big thank you to Lavelle Productions, who did the audio and helped us out with the production here this year. Fantastic work. Ladies and gentlemen, the man of the hour, Big Daddy Don Garlits, to take us home tonight.
Well, I would just like to thank everyone for coming out. It's really been a great banquet, and I'd like to thank Chuck and his staff. They put on a great show here. It's a lot of work to make this happen. It's, you know, it's so funny. We work on this thing for 6 months, and it's all over in a couple of hours. And even that sometimes gets a little long. But a lot's been said here tonight about me. I'm hearing now for the first time in 14 years. It's a little garbled because the cochlear implant picks up every sound, and so it's sometimes in a big crowd like that, it's hard to hear the words, but it's a lot better than it's been for a long time. But I'd like to talk about my wife, Pat. No one knows really the true story about everything. There's a couple of little stories. I know it's getting late, but I won't bore you with too long, but there are a couple of things you ought to know. I met Pat in the first week of May of 1952, and within 4 hours of the meeting, I knew that this was the woman I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. The first day, I had a 40 Ford with a Cadillac motor in it, and this is 1952, and hot rodders were black leather jacketed hoodlums then, and this was before Wally Parks got all those clubs together and formed the National Hot Rod Association in '52. It wasn't really going strong yet, but we were not honorable people in those days. And I showed up at her house, and she was sitting on the front porch, and she real quickly jumped up out of the swing and ran out and got in the car, but she hardly shut the door, and here come the daddy out of the house. And he walked down her side of the car, around the back of the car, looking at it, and he stuck his head in the window and he said, "Have her home by 11, boy." And I mean, he meant it. Then I went to the drive-in movie, and that was the next deal. Everybody took your girlfriends to the drive-in movies in those days because You know, you could smooch with them, and especially with a convertible, you know. And I parked on the back row of the drive-in movie, and she said, "Why are we parking back here?" And I said, "Because it's more private and we'll be able to smooch." She says, "Take me home immediately. I don't even kiss on the first date. I'm saving myself for my husband." And I said, "That would be me." I mean, that just came right out of my mouth. That was May of 1952. February the 20th, 1953, we were married. Her mother, I never forget her mother, when I asked her dad if I could marry his daughter, and he was thinking about it, the mother said, "I always hoped that Pat would make something of herself and become a professional, not like me, just a housewife." And the dad said, "You raised a wonderful family, Vivian, and I'd be proud to have Don as my son-in-law as a mechanic." He says, "I know a lot of wonderful mechanics." And that was a great start. We were married in 1953 on February the 20th, and we took our first vacation in the summer of 1954. We worked 7 days a week. In the beginning, I worked for Wheeler's Garage when the marriage took place, and she was the secretary to the president of Harris Paint Company in Tampa, Florida, and they made all the paint for the Cresses and the Woolworths and Grants in those days. Maybe a few people in this room that remember those companies, long gone now. I got in an argument with my boss and quit, and on the way home from the garage, I went by this old gas station on Nebraska Avenue. It had a sign for rent. I called the lady. I went to my houses before they had cell phones. I went to the house. I called the lady. I rented the garage for $125 a month. And the next phone call went to Harris Paint Company, to my wife. I said, "Give them your 2 weeks' notice. I've rented a gas station on Nebraska Avenue. We are in business for ourselves." She never said one word, "Are you crazy?" or anything like that. She says, "I'll do it." And she became the comptroller and wrote all the checks, wrote all the letters. She was an excellent secretary until 2003, when she came through the doorway of the museum shop. I was on the turret lathe, and she said, "Would you come in and turn on the computer for me?" And I thought that was kind of strange. She'd been to computer school. I knew a little bit about them, but not much. I went in the office. I pushed a couple of buttons, a screen come up, and she said, "How did you do that?" It still raises the hair on the back of my neck when I tell this story. I said, "What is wrong with you?" And she says, "We need to see the neurologist." We went to see Dr. Jose Gaudier. He had this great big thick file. And I said, "Doctor, when did you diagnose my wife?" January 2000. I looked at her. She says, "I didn't want to tell you." Now, we got to remember those dates. In 2001, I went to Indianapolis and made my first 300-mile-an-hour run. She didn't want to interfere with that. She knew that I was working on the car. And I ran my car in 2002 and 2003, made about 15 runs over 300 miles an hour. About at the end of 2003, Summit was going to give me a couple of $1 million to come into drag racing and run all the races. And Pat asked me real nice, says, "Please, honey, don't do this anymore. It's scaring me to death." And that was the end. I never drove the car again. She was Wonder Woman in the flesh. All these years, she came to work almost every day. She did all the bookkeeping. And I don't know how she did it. She ran a household. She'd get there about 10 o'clock in the morning. Our shop was always close to where we lived. And she'd go home about 4 and cook the meals. And then she raised his 2 wonderful daughters and did all of this at the same time. I just couldn't have done it without her. It's as simple as that, ladies and gentlemen. Every wonderful, successful man, I'd say 90% of the time, has got a good, hard-working woman behind him. And that's why we came up with the Pat Garlitz Award for these ladies that have contributed so much to drag racing and are the unsung heroes. And I just wanted all of you to hear the story, that little inside story of how it all came about. And I really, really appreciate the participation. I appreciate the wonderful sponsors, and also all the companies that have bought a lot of tables in this room that allow us to seat a lot of the inductees and the people at no charge. I just can't say enough for the way this Hall of Fame and the museum was an unbelievable story there. We had it in Seffner for 6 years and had no visitors. And my wife said to me one morning, remember I told you she's the comptroller, she said, honey, what are we going to do with that white elephant when you can't race anymore and support it? And I just, off the top of my head, I said, I thought we'd just move it to the interstate. Now, we were on the property that my mother and dad had hacked out of the wilderness in 1927, built everything there, had planted 65 citrus trees on the grounds. We had a beautiful lake out back. We went water skiing every afternoon in the summertime. And she said, you would move off of this property? And I said, no, we just put it up on I-4. Now remember, I told you it's a smart woman. She said, honey, I-4 is where the people live in Tampa and work in Orlando, or live in Orlando and work in Tampa, and they cross each other twice a day. They're not stopping in a museum. We would have to put it on I-75 if it's going to be successful. And we started looking. And we found this piece of property in Brooksville. You could see it when you went over the overpass. It was a beautiful piece of property. It was on a hill. It had a big sign that you could actually read from the interstate, for sale. And so in January of 1982, I said to her, I just turned 50. I said, honey, how much money do we have? We need to go look at that property and get this move started. I'm 50 years old, you know, how long am I going to want to do anything? You know, I'm 94, I'm still liking to do things. In about 15 minutes, she said we could write a check for $80,000 and still have enough money in the account to run the drag racing operation. Now, something you people need to understand here, my wife and I never bought a car or a home on credit. Everything we owned was saved up and bought when we could write a check. And so I said to her, that $80,000, that'll do it. Let's get in the car and go buy that piece of property. We went up there, and the guy, thank God, wanted $250,000 for that piece of dirt. I couldn't believe it. So we got a real estate agent, and we tramped around in the woods all that day. Nothing. Nothing was big enough or close enough or cheap enough that we could afford it. And so it was dark, and we're headed home. And I said, let's stop at the Holiday Inn here in Brooksville and go further north in the morning. There might be something further north. And so we got a room, we had some dinner. We come back to the room, and before we went to bed, we got down on our knees by the bed and prayed to God, was we doing the right thing? Did God want us to move off of that homestead property in Seffner? Did he want that museum moved? We don't know, but we're going to go look one more day, Lord, and if it's your will that we move this museum, you will show us the property. And if we look all day and we don't find anything, we'll know that you don't want us to move. We'll go back to Seffner and we'll live our lives out there and we'll never trouble you with it again. The next morning we got up, the Wildwood exit was the next exit. We stopped there just briefly. The closest piece of property for sale was $350,000, and it was almost a quarter of a mile from the intersection. no good. The next exit was the Bellevue exit, totally undeveloped. We come off the ramp, and there's this 16-acre piece of dirt with just some oak trees up on the other end, not a thing on it. And my wife just almost got giddy. She says, "Oh my God, that's it." She says, "We'll put the museum right there as the car's moving down there," and that's where the museum is sitting. And she says, "We can build our house up there in the trees." And I said, "Don't get too excited, I don't see any signs." So we turned around and went up on 475A, stopped the car. I got out of the car. We needed about 16 acres. I got down in the ditch. I intended to pace the front off. I know something about math, and I knew about what it was going to be. As I got down in the ditch, there's a tiny little sign, no more than 6 inches by 18, and it said, "For sale," and a phone number. I said, "Write down this number, it's for sale." We drove over to the Stuckey's to the payphone, and I dial the phone, and this lady says, "This is Shirley. What do you want?" And it just ran a chill through me because Shirley Modowdy had just kicked my ass in the AHRA World Championships. I regained my composure, and I said, "There's a piece of property over here on the interstate that's got your phone number on it." She said, "That's my property. What do you want to know about it?" I said, "Just tell me one thing, ma'am. How much is it?" Now, just everybody sat real still. She said, "It's 80,000 cash." And I'll tell you what, if that don't put the fear of God in you, then you got no help. Anyway, she says, "What are you going to do with it?" I said, "I'm going to put a museum on it." She says, "You can't do that. It's agriculture. It can only be a farm." I said, "I'll get the zone changed." She says, "Don't you think it would be prudent to get the zone changed before you actually paid for it? In other words, put a deposit on it, get the zone changed?" I said, "No, I take my chances with the county commissioners. I want it just like it is. I want to buy it." Okay. 30 days later, I owned it. We walked down the southern fence line, like your new place, kicking the dirt, And this man come over from a beautiful house just south of us, which burned down later. And he said, "I'm Robert DuPont, and we own this farm south of you. We did not know it was for sale. I'll give you $180,000 right now cash for your property." And I said to him, "Mr. DuPont, that's a generous offer, but I will never be able to sell this land." And he said, "Why is that, Mr. Garlitz?" I says, "Because God himself gave it to me, and that's the truth." I got a real shock. Then I turned in all my paperwork. I'd changed zones in Tampa. I knew how to do that. And I had a 2-page speech made about like Ron's. It was going to tell everything I did. I was going to talk about how many people I was going to bring to Ocala. Now, mind you, they had no visitors for 6 years, and I'm telling them I'm going to change everything. But in fact, it did change everything. I got 2 lines out, and the county commissioner said, "Stop, we don't want to hear it." I'm going to tell you folks, in that brief second till he made the next statement, my heart raced, my mind went 1,000,000 miles an hour, and I thought, what have I done? What in the world are they thinking? Why would they want to leave a piece of agricultural property right up against the exit? And then he said, "We're going to give you the zone. What we want to know is, why did you land on this intersection? It's never going to be nothing." That's just how much they know. And it's been from, while we were building the exhibits in 1982 until 1983, a car rolled in. In March of '83, a car rolled in. And it was a man and his wife and 3 boys. And they said, "Is this the drag racing museum?" I said, "Yes, sir, but we're not open." But he walked in and we were going back and forth in that main room. Now, mind you, everything we owned were in that 10,000 square foot main room. And they looked in there, and he came back to the car and he said, "Mr. Garlitz, The family and I have come a long ways. Would you mind if we went in and just looked around? And I said, no, but it'll be $25, $5 each. They just shelled it out, and then they went. 1 year later, we actually had the signs up, the roads were in, and we cut a ribbon. Between that ribbon cutting and that couple, we sold over 11,000 tickets. It was, I call it sacred ground. God did want that museum there, and he's got it there. And there, look at this room. This is the living proof of what I'm saying. No man could do this by himself. He had to have a good woman with him, and he had to have God's help. And that's my story, and I'm going to stick with it. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And that is a wrap. An incredible night, and congratulations once again to our honorees and to those award winners tonight. We'll see you all next year. Have a great drag racing season in 2026.